There's breaking news. The state of Texas just beat the Biden administration, at least for now. Texas had enacted a new law giving its local law enforcement the right to deport anyone entering the country illegally. But the Biden administration fought this new law, saying, in short, that only the federal government makes these decisions. Texas and the Biden administration are in court fighting this out. But in the meantime, the Supreme Court said Texas may enforce its own immigration law. The Texas law, known as SB 4, makes illegal border crossings a state crime, and as noted, it allows state officials to arrest, jail, and in some cases deport migrants who cross the United States-Mexico border illegally. But let me repeat, this matter has not been resolved, only that the Supreme Court is right now allowing Texas to enforce it while the matter does get decided in court. Litigation in lower courts is still ongoing, so technically this law could still be blocked at a later date, but tonight it's in effect. Also tonight, almost 3 years after the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal where 13 U.S. service members lost their lives, the chair of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Texas Congressman Michael McCaul, held a hearing putting a spotlight on the failures that ultimately resulted in the deaths of those 13. Chairman McCaul joins me later this hour. But now it's time for more breaking news. Tonight, primary polls, they're set to close in 5 states. And the polls are also set to close in a special election in the state of California. We're less than 1 hour away from the first polls closing at 7 p.m. Eastern. In Florida, most polls close at 7:30 p.m. Eastern and 8 p.m. All polls close in both the Ohio primary and the Illinois primary. The last polls in Florida close, and most polls in Kansas's primary close. At 9 p.m. Eastern, the last polls in the Kansas primary close, and the first polls in the Arizona primary close. An hour later, 10 p.m. Eastern, the last polls in Arizona close. And finally, at 11 p.m. Eastern, polls in the California special election are set to close. And as we are waiting for polls to start closing, just moments ago, President Joe Biden wrapped up a campaign event in Las Vegas, Nevada. Earlier today, the president held a campaign event in Reno, Nevada. And it may seem like Biden has already had a busy day, but the president is not yet finished. Biden is right now on his way to Air Force One and will be wheels up to Phoenix, Arizona any minute. That is where he will host his third campaign event of the day. That event is expected to begin around 7:30 p.m. Eastern. But let's get back to the primaries that are underway right now. Now, I know President Joe Biden has already secured the Democratic Party nomination, and former President Donald Trump has already secured his Republican Party nomination. But the focus tonight is on the down-ballot races. And I do not want to get too in the weeds, but I do want to highlight a few primaries. Let's start with the Ohio Senate Republican primary. Former President Donald Trump is backing businessman Bernie Moreno. That's in contrast to Ohio Republican Governor Mike DeWine and Ohio Republican Senator Rob Portman. They're both throwing their support behind Ohio State Senator Matt Dolan. Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRouche is also in the running. Now, whoever wins the Ohio Senate primary will face off in November against Democrat Ohio Senator Sherrod Brown. Brown has held that Ohio Senate seat since January 2007. All right, let's move on to California. Today is the race to fill former House Speaker and former California Congressman Kevin McCarthy's House seat. Whoever wins this election today will fill McCarthy's seat in California's 20th Congressional District, only until McCarthy's term ends, which is this January. So who's in the running? Well, the two front runners are State Assembly member Vince Vaughn. Vaughn was a one-time aide to McCarthy and is backed by both former President Donald Trump and former Speaker McCarthy. The other frontrunner is Tulare County Sheriff Mike Boudreaux. As you can see, there are a total of 9 candidates in the special elections on your screen. But these two men who I just mentioned, Vaughn and Boudreaux, have also already secured their spots in the November general election to run for the full term. Now, before I get into a few more primaries. Oh, that's my favorite. That's right. We have a rumor alert. And it's about former House Speaker Kevin McCarthy. Rumor has it McCarthy is on Trump's short list for Chief of Staff at the White House should Trump win back the White House in November. But let's get back now to the primaries. In Illinois' 12th Congressional District, incumbent Illinois Congressman Mike Bost, who's endorsed by former President Donald Trump, is facing a challenge from former Illinois gubernatorial candidate Darren Bailey. Bailey's endorsed by Florida Congressman Matt Gaetz. And the big Democratic primary to watch tonight in Illinois is the 7th Congressional District. In that race, 82-year-old incumbent Illinois Congressman Danny Davis, who's held that seat for nearly 30 years, is facing 4 challengers. But the front runner among them is activist Keena Collins. Collins came within 6 points of unseating Davis 2 years ago and is back for round 2. Yes, there's a lot of political news tonight, but I do want to talk in greater depth about tonight's primary. just in Arizona. Newsmax correspondent John Glasgow is on the ground in Phoenix, Arizona with the latest. John?
Yeah, Greta, it's raining here in Phoenix, Arizona, but the voters, they're at the polls. We dropped by one of them here this afternoon and got a chance to talk with some of the voters there. But we do know there's 4 hours to go until the polls close, and the votes will start to come in, and both President Biden as well as former President Trump are very aware of the importance of this state in the general election. President Biden only won by more than 45,000 votes in 2020, so they are both looking at this as a very important state going into the general election. So President Biden is expected to land here in Arizona tonight. He was in Nevada, as you mentioned earlier. He made 2 stops there, one in Reno and one in Las Vegas. Biden is trying to appeal to the Latino voters on his visit, and that's because Democrats have relied on Latino voters in states like Nevada and Arizona, and they could play an important role in the presidential election. According to the New York Times, look at this headline here. Latinos, they make up roughly 1 in 4 eligible voters in Arizona and Nevada states. Those are states that Biden won in 2020, but Trump has found support among many in the diverse Latino electorate, including evangelicals, as well as the ones that are focused on the border security. Now, surveys show that Trump's winning more than 40% of Latino voters, a level not achieved by Republicans in 2 decades. And when I spoke with some voters here in the state today, they say that the border is one of the most important ballot issues for them. President Biden had this to say at a campaign office in Reno.
It gets on down to, as we used to say, my football coach, all block and tackling, knocking on doors, calling people, going and making the case face-to-face with them. That's why we're opening these campaign headquarters. We're opening them all over the country, and we're going to continue to do so.
We're also watching the race for Senate. Carrie Lake running running for that, and she's casted a ballot here in Arizona. She put this out on X and makes no mistake who she voted for. She says, "I proudly cast my vote for President Donald J. Trump in the Arizona presidential preference election." Trump is expected to pick up the win on the Republican primary, as most of the candidates have either dropped out of the race, but it doesn't matter. He's already clinched enough delegates to be the GOP presidential nominee. So something else we're going to watch here tonight, Greta, is whether there'll be another protest vote in wake of President Biden's handling with the Israel-Hamas war. We have heard that some Democrats here in the state are saying that they're encouraging people to vote for Marianne Williamson instead of Biden as a way to protest against his actions. So we'll wait and watch to see how that all plays out tonight. Send it back to you.
John Glasgow, thank you. Now it's time for more 24/24. First up, we have an update on former President Donald Trump's vice president shortlist. According to Bloomberg, Trump has ruled out entrepreneur Vivek Ramaswamy as his vice presidential running mate. Instead, according to the political rumor mill, Trump is considering Ramaswamy for a cabinet position, which would include, or could include, Homeland Security Secretary. Why Homeland Security Secretary for him? Well, according to Bloomberg, some Trump allies believe Ramaswamy would be ideal for the job because he's a good public speaker. And on top of that, Ramaswamy is an Indian-American son of an immigrant. That fact alone could help neutralize criticism of immigration restrictions. But Trump is not the only 2024 hopeful who's keeping us guessing on his potential running mate selection. Yesterday, former Democrat, now independent 2024 hopeful Robert F. Kennedy Jr. took to X, formerly known as Twitter, to say this.
You've probably heard by now that I'm about to announce my running mate, the person who will serve as my vice president. Those press reports got some of the details wrong, but on March 26th in Oakland, I'm going to straighten it all out. I'm going to announce that day an extraordinary running mate who's going to be my partner in governance. I can't tell you who it is right now, but I can tell you that I could not possibly have found a better partner for governing this country. And I'll give you another hint. This announcement is really going to shake up the political establishment.
Now, if you watch this news show, you know that yesterday I reported that according to a media gossip site, Mediaite, Kennedy is planning to tap California-based attorney and entrepreneur Nicole Shanahan to be his running mate. And besides being a lawyer, Shanahan is divorced from Google co-founder Sergey Brin. So is the TV gossip site right? Well, will Kennedy tap Shanahan to be his running mate? Well, according to what Kennedy just said, it looks like we're just going to have to wait until March 26th to find that one out. And lastly, today, former President Donald Trump took a break from blasting his political rival, President Biden, and took aim at the Duke of Sussex, Prince Harry. Trump was asked if he would deport the prince from the United States if it's true that the prince lied on his visa application. Now, this is if and only if Trump wins the presidency in November, but this question comes after Prince Harry admitted in his memoir to taking illegal drugs. Here's Trump's answer.
And we'll have to see if they know something about the drugs, and if he lied, they'll have to take appropriate action.
Appropriate action?
Yeah.
Which might mean not staying in America.
I don't know. You'll have to tell me. You just have to tell me. You would have thought they would have known this a long time ago.
You would.
But I thought they were very disrespectful to the family, to the royal family. I'm a big fan of the concept of the royal family and the royal family. Now, I'm a little prejudiced because I thought the Queen was incredible.
Politico White House and Washington reporter Daniel Lippman joins me. Nice to see you, Dana. Okay, the race I'm watching tonight is the one in Ohio for the see who the Republican candidate is for the Senate, because you've got the Trump candidate versus the non-Trump candidate, but that candidate supported by the outgoing senator and the governor.
Yeah, it's a fascinating look at the Republican Party, where it stands. This is almost like the last stand of the establishment Republican Party versus a MAGA party. And what's interesting as well is that Democrats are pouring millions of dollars, I think $2 million, into boosting Bernie Moreno, because they think that he is he's easier for them to beat.
Yeah. That's the Trump candidate.
And who has been dogged by, there was an AP report last week that there was an email address associated with him on a website to find, male sex partners.
Going back.
Which he denied.
But yeah, he denies and goes back 15 years. 15 years, so it goes back a long time.
But it's Democrats have gotten criticism for the strategy of meddling in Republican primaries to help out Trump candidates, because people think, why don't you use that money for actual Democrats and not trying to mess with the Republican primary? They're trying to kind of play three-dimensional chess and trying to pick the opponent that you want to run against.
Okay, so that's the race I'm watching. Are there any polls or any indication? I mean, the official voting polls are closing soon, but is Dolan the conventional or the governor's candidate and the senator's candidate versus Moreno? So
Dolan has surged in recent polls, and that's why he was supposed to go to a different state, I think maybe Arizona, but he moved his trip over the weekend to go to Ohio because he wanted
That's where he had a big rally.
Yeah, and made some controversial remarks about the bloodbath that was there. But in all seriousness, he viewed this as, hey, this is my guy. He supported Moreno for a while. And what's interesting also is that Moreno, he's the father-in-law of a Congressman, Max Miller, who used to work for Biden, for Trump as his personal aide. And so it's this kind of test of whether Trump has sway in a pretty red state.
You mentioned the word that they use the term bloodbath, and I know that a lot of people are all whooped up about it. Every time, like when Schumer said, we're coming for you, Kavanaugh, not so much coming up. But the thing is that one of the most liberal journalists who was at MSNBC essentially called for hope for the assassination of President Biden, or President Trump, former President Trump, on Twitter. Yet it's crickets. It's okay when someone in our club does it, the journalism club, and we can say horrible, rotten, threatening things. It's like, what? Who said what?
Remember, it was Kathy Griffin who had the, on New Year's Eve.
Well, CNN did axe her for that.
Yeah, there's a line, I guess.
But the thing is, this thing that Keith Olbermann did on former MSNBC, and nobody's saying boo.
Well, Keith Olbermann has not had a TV show for a long time. I think we all know that.
But the point is that the journalists sort of circle the wagons. I mean, they're all scandalized by what Trump says, but then they circle their wagons, even if it's somebody who's an old person from the club.
What's funny is that everyone benefits from this. Liberals, journalists, and TV networks. They get segments that they can hit Trump on. Trump raises money on, hey, the liberal media is attacking me. I was looking at my email. There was bloodbath in the subject lines from Trump.
So basically, we're all crazy.
Yeah, and so I did watch the video. He did talk about the auto industry right before, and he has talked about immigrants poisoning the blood of America. So he seems to like the word blood in some of his remarks.
Basically, we all need to
take a chill pill and read a book one day.
Indeed, a book. What's that? Daniel Lippman, thank you very much. Nice to see you. Still ahead, House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Michael McCaul joins us, pulling back the curtain on what really happened on our catastrophic evacuation from Afghanistan when the record continues.
While the president has never publicly stated the names of your children, I will here today. Their names are Darren Hoover, Johanny Rosario, Nicole G., Hunter Lopez, Dagan Page, Humberto Sanchez, David Espinoza, Jared Schmitz, Riley McCollum, Dylan Marola, Kareem Nakui, Maxton Soviak, and Ryan Noss. Those are the names of the fallen. May God bless them. They will not be forgotten.
Today, House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Michael McCaul remembering those 13 fallen heroes. On August 26, 2021, those 13 U.S. service members were killed by a terrorist suicide bombing. The terror attack occurred at the Abbey Gate outside the airport in Kabul during the disastrous Afghanistan withdrawal. Today, almost 3 years later, Chairman McCaul held that hearing, putting a spotlight on the failures that ultimately resulted in the deaths of those 13. In attendance, former Chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, retired General Mark Milley, and former Commander of United States Central Command, retired General Kenneth McKenzie, Jr. Here are portions of today's hearing.
In short, the United States military performed one of the most incredible evacuations under pressure in recorded history in an extremely difficult, dynamic, and dangerous environment. That performance is due to the individual bravery, competence, and compassion of every private to general who had any role in this NEO. At the end of 20 years, we, the military, helped build an army, a state, but we could not forge a nation. The enemy occupied Kabul, the overthrow of the government occurred, and the military we supported for 2 decades faded away. That is a strategic failure. I'm committed, and I will honor that commitment, to get you the answers, to get you to the truth.
I briefed President Trump on a plan to completely depart Afghanistan on 3 June 2020. This plan envisioned the complete withdrawal of all our forces and our diplomats and citizens. It also contemplated the possible withdrawal of Afghans who had served with us. The plan had a number of options, but it was the framework for everything that followed. Ultimately, President Trump selected a branch of the plan that maintained 2,500 U.S. military personnel in Afghanistan by Inauguration Day in January 2021. We had branches to that plan to complete a withdrawal by May of 2021 had we been so ordered. On 11 April 2021, I received orders from President Biden through the Secretary of Defense to execute a full military withdrawal by 11 September 2021, a date which was subsequently modified to the end of August. This decision did not include the withdrawal of our embassy, our citizens, and at-risk Afghans. It's important to understand that we had a complete plan to execute that task as well, but were not ordered to do so. The President's decision was to maintain an embassy, to not require our citizens to leave, and of course, to not expedite the extraction of at-risk Afghans. This was not a military decision.
Chairman of the House Foreign Affairs Committee, Texas Congressman Michael McCaul joins me. Good evening, sir. Did the generals agree? Did the generals agree with the evacuation in August of 2021 as before it even began? Did they agree with it? And if not, did they do any pushback on the State Department and the President?
No, they did not agree with the evacuation. The top military officers, the 2 generals that testified, Chairman of Joint Chiefs, CENTCOM Commander, and the intelligence community all advised the President against the withdrawal itself. But to make things worse, it's the way it was executed. You know, the Department of Defense really did its job, as the military often does, but the State Department that has, by law, the responsibility to come up with a plan of evacuation wholly failed to get this done in a timely manner. And you heard General McKenzie talk about how they just wanted to leave the embassy intact and normalize with the Taliban. Meanwhile, embassy employees are trying to get out of there because the Taliban is taking it over. And it's this lack of planning, because when you fail to plan, you plan to fail, that led to the chaos at HKIA, ultimately the bombing at Abbey Gate that killed the 13 service members, wounded many others, and killed 170 Afghans. They're the ones with the blood on their hands, including the President of the United States, who disregarded all this advice.
Well, it's not even just, I mean, what you've just outlined, like the 170, the 13, is even when I was in South America, where people were collecting to walk the Darien Gate, there were at-risk Afghan citizens who we promised to help. They helped us while we were there. They put their lives at risk, and then we cut and run. And sure, we took his money, we took our own staff, and we took those we can. But I think one of the other big dirty secrets is the people that we left behind who helped us, who risked their lives.
Right. Right. And that came up at the hearing. Not only the American citizens, but as you pointed out, the Afghan partners that worked with our special forces that now have a death warrant on them. They're being hunted down by the Taliban using the biometric equipment we left behind, and they're being executed. And so we had a duty to protect them. We promised them we would. And because the State Department had absolutely zero plan to deal with this, again, the military retrograded on time, but the State Department was not able to get all the Americans and the Afghan partners out. Now they're left behind at the mercy of the Taliban. Yeah.
So where's the accountability? You know, like, okay, everyone's just like, oops, so what? I mean, like, you know, there's got to be some accountability by the people, whether it's at the State Department or somebody. I mean, it's catastrophic what happened. 13 died, 170 died, $86 billion left behind, and we ditched the Afghan partners we had, and nobody's accountable.
And that's where we're going with this. We're going to go not only higher up the chain at state, but also we want the commanding officers on the ground at Abbey Gate to testify. The DOD has been very resistant to our request, but now that we have the chairman of the Joint Chiefs and CENTCOM, it's going to be hard for them to not allow, say, you know, General Donahue or Admiral Vaisley, who were the ones really on the ground at Abbey Gate, who, remember, the sniper reported permission to engage. Here is a photo of the suicide bomber, and he forwards it to the command center. Command center doesn't respond, resulting in the deaths of so many. Somebody's got to be held accountable. To your point, though, most of them have been promoted since Abbey Gate and since this fiasco.
It's terrible. Chairman Michael McCall, thank you, and I hope you continue to hold hearings on this because, you know, the American people need to know. Thank you, sir. Coming up, former President Donald Trump going on the offensive. This time, he is the one suing. We're going to tell you who he's suing, and you actually know the person he's suing. That when the record continues. Former President Donald Trump is suing ABC News and its Sunday morning show host George Stephanopoulos for defamation. Here's what provoked this lawsuit.
You've endorsed Donald Trump for president. Judges and two separate juries have found him liable for rape and for defaming the victim of that rape. How do you square your endorsement of Donald Trump with the testimony we just saw?
Well, I will tell you, I was raped at the age of 16. And any rape victim will tell you, I've lived for 30 years with an incredible amount of shame over being raped. I didn't come forward because of that judgment and shame that I felt. And it's a shame that you will never feel, George, and I'm not going to sit here on your show and be asked a question meant to shame me about another potential rape victim. I'm not going to do that.
It's actually not about shaming you. It's a question about Donald Trump.
No, you are shaming me.
You've endorsed Donald Trump for president.
Right.
Donald Trump has been found liable for rape by a jury. Donald Trump has been found liable for defaming the victim of that rape by a jury. It's been affirmed by a judge.
It was not a criminal court case, number one. Number two, I live with shame. And you're asking me a question about my political choices, trying to shame me as a rape victim, and I find it disgusting.
Trump has filed this lawsuit in federal court in the Southern District of Florida. It reads in part, quote, defendant George Stephanopoulos, during the airing of his weekly television show This Week with George Stephanopoulos, falsely stated on several occasions that plaintiff, meaning Trump, had been found liable by multiple juries for the rape of Miss E. Jean Carroll. These statements were and were made false and were made by defendant Stephanopoulos with actual malice or with a reckless disregard for the truth. Given that defendant Stephanopoulos knows that these statements are patently and demonstrably false, end quote. And on page 7 of that same lawsuit, under the section Statement of Facts, there is a photo of the jury verdict in the case Stephanopoulos was talking about. The jury verdict form with the jury verdict reads, quote, "Did Ms. Carroll prove by a preponderance of the evidence that Mr. Trump raped Ms. Carroll?" And you can see the jury checked no. Gray Analytics Vice President, General Counsel, former U.S. Attorney for the Northern District of Alabama, Jay Town, joins me. Boy, Jay, ABC News and George Stephanopoulos, they fell all over themselves in this one. I think he made 10 mentions of the rape in his, according to the lawsuit, at least in his show. And it just didn't happen. He wasn't found liable for rape.
Yeah, E. Jean Carroll has not been found to be a rape victim, and Donald Trump has not been found to be a rapist. But yet, like you said, Greta, at least 10 times, perhaps more, not to mention the media, whether it's social media or actual media, that parroted this interview to millions of viewers
let me
after
stop you
George
right there.
Stephanopoulos'
Let me even stop you there. The irony of that is that it was picked that false statement of the rape. And like, look, you can hate Trump, but it just didn't happen. As Stephanopoulos said, he wasn't found liable for rape by this jury. But is that one of the news sites that picked it up is Mediaite. They put the headline up. Well, Mediaite is owned or was owned by Dan Abrams, who is ABC News' chief legal analyst. So it's like they're falling all over themselves with this one.
Well, it tells you a lot about Dan Abrams, too. I've not lost any fondness for him. But I'll say this. In the state of Florida, Donald Trump, good for you, President Trump. You don't have to sit back and take this any longer. And he's not. And I'm glad that he filed this lawsuit, and I hope he's successful. In the state of Florida, and this is a state suit, it's in federal court, but that's just because the plaintiff and the defendant are not both from Florida. But all he has to prove is that there was a false statement made to third parties about President Trump and that it wasn't true. And because it is about an immoral act or a crime, which rape is both, I would suggest, it's per se defamation. So
even
the burden
does he have
shifts
to
completely.
show, even though it's the media, does he have to show malice? Now, I know that he says that the malice is because they kept saying it repeatedly, but there still is a higher standard. But I know it's defamation per se when you accuse someone of a crime. Rape's a crime, but then you've got this malice component.
Yes, and the great thing about the per se law in Florida is that when you accuse someone of a crime or of immoral activity like sexual assault or rape, and you do so falsely, that actual malice is presumed. Now, you have to prove extreme malice to get, punitive damages. So there would have to be some real concentration on the actual damages or injuries to President Trump. But that's not the point. The point that I believe President Trump is making here, he doesn't need a cash grab. What President Trump is saying here is, I'm not putting up with this anymore. I'm done with the lies. I'm done with George Stephanopoulos and ABC News and Dan Abrams and Mediaite and the rest telling untruths about me.
All right, I'm going to make one last statement. Look, it's easy to make mistakes on TV. Boy, I know I run that risk every single night. But the other thing that's mentioned in the lawsuit is that apparently they asked him to correct it or something to make it. And apparently ABC News fell short of that, wildly fell short. And that's going to be a problem for ABC News. J-Town, thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks.
Turning to more turbulence in the not-so-friendly skies on Sunday night. An inner windshield of an Alaska Airlines Boeing 737 jet cracked open. The incident occurred while the plane was landing in Portland's International Airport. In a statement, the airline says, quote, Alaska Airlines 737 fleet is outfitted with 5-layer windscreens that have an outer pane, 3 inner layers, and an inner pane. If an inner pane cracks, the other pane and layers can maintain cabin pressure, end quote. The aircraft had 159 passengers, 6 crew members on board. Meanwhile, Alaska Airlines is one of many airlines recently reporting several mishaps. According to Newsweek, United Airlines has suffered its 10th incident in 2 weeks. Yesterday, its Boeing 777, scheduled to depart San Francisco for Japan, was held up for hours on the tarmac. A passenger reported that the pilot announced, quote, the right engine is not working. And then after nearly 5 hours of maintenance work, the flight finally took off without issue. Meanwhile, last Friday, another United Airlines flight had a mishap. It was discovered upon landing in San Francisco on a flight from Oregon that a United Boeing 737 was missing a panel. And that's not all. The day before that, an Airbus A320 arrived in San Francisco from Dallas-Fort Worth with a hydraulic leak and a, quote, small amount of smoke. As an aside, I don't know about you, but I would never describe smoke coming out of an airplane I was on as, quote, a small amount of smoke, so as to suggest no big deal. But maybe you and I are different on that one. But moving on to March 8th, a Boeing 737 MAX 8 rolled off a runway at George Bush International Airport, Houston, Texas. And on March 7th, a Boeing 777 heading to Japan from San Francisco lost a tire during takeoff. Those tires, by the way, weigh about 250 pounds. On March 4th, a Boeing 737-900 from Houston to Florida was forced to make an emergency landing just minutes after takeoff. Flames exploded from one of its engines. That same day, another United Airlines plane heading to San Francisco from Honolulu experienced engine failure. It occurred mid-flight but managed to land safely. Yesterday, the United Airlines CEO put out this statement, quote, unfortunately, in the past few weeks, our airline has experienced a number of incidents that are reminders of the importance of safety. While they are all unrelated, I want you to know that these incidents have our attention and have sharpened our focus. Thank you for flying United, and I hope to see you on board soon, end quote. We'll be right back. A Chinese ambassador met with the Hamas terrorist leader. It happened on Sunday. China's foreign ministry is admitting the meeting, saying on March 17, 2024, Foreign Ministry Ambassador Wang Kejian met with Hamas Politburo Chairman Hani Yah during his visit to Qatar and exchanged views on the Gaza conflict and other issues, end quote. The brief statement does not mention what exactly was said, but China has been vocal in its opposition to the ongoing war. So, who is Ismail Haniyeh, and why did a Chinese envoy meet with him on Sunday in Qatar, far away from the war in Gaza? This is Ismail Abdel Salam Ahmed Haniyeh. He's the political leader of Hamas. You're watching him delight in the violence, the terror, the slaughter unfolding in Israel on October 7th. He is comfortably watching these unthinkable acts from the safety of Doha, Qatar. That is where he has lived and been protected for several years. In this video, Haniyeh is joyfully inviting other Hamas leaders to join him in prayer, thanking Allah for Hamas's victory, its slaughter and killing of Israelis. Who is Haniyeh? Born in 1963 in a refugee camp in Gaza, his family was displaced there from a nearby Israeli coastal town after the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. In the 1980s, while studying Arabic literature in Gaza, he joined Hamas. Haniyeh spent time in and out of prison for protests against Israel. In 1992, Israel deported Haniyeh and other Hamas members to Lebanon. Haniyeh quickly rose to the ranks of Hamas, forming a close relationship with the group's founder, Sheikh Ahmed Yassin. Haniyeh eventually returned to Gaza, and in 2006 grabbed international attention when he was elected Prime Minister of the Palestinian National Authority. After that election, Haniyeh sent a letter to then U.S. President George W. Bush calling for a truce with Israel and for statehood. The Bush administration did not respond. A year later, in 2007, Hamas seized full control of Gaza. By the way, Ismail Haniyeh is a billionaire, and you know, he didn't become a billionaire by inventing the iPhone or even running a hedge fund. According to reports, Haniyeh made a large amount of money, a very large amount, by charging tariffs on humanitarian goods going in and out of Gaza meant for people in great need. Haniyeh has also made huge sums of money skimming it from fees that desperate people have been charged going in and out of Gaza over the years. Coming up, today Trump's former White House advisor Peter Navarro went to prison, but he had a lot to say before turning himself in. You're going to hear from the former White House advisor, now federal inmate, when the record continues. Today, Trump's former White House advisor, Peter Navarro, surrendered to federal prison. He was convicted for failure to comply with a congressional subpoena. So let's rewind. Back in February of 2022, the House committee investigating the January 6th attack on the U.S. Capitol subpoenaed Navarro, but Navarro resisted the subpoena. He claimed that his testimony was barred by executive privilege. He also refused to provide Congress with documents. After being indicted for failure to comply with the subpoena, Navarro went to trial. He was convicted last September of 2 counts of contempt of Congress. In January, Navarro was sentenced to 4 months in prison. Then Navarro appealed his contempt of Congress conviction. He asked the U.S. Court of Appeals for the D.C. Circuit to put the imposition of his sentence on hold while he waited the result of his appeal. But the Court of Appeals denied that request. And then next, Navarro filed an emergency application to the United States Supreme Court. But late last night, Chief Justice John Roberts, who handles emergency matters involving cases in D.C., also denied Navarro's request. And so today, Navarro's prison sentence began. He will be serving his 4 months at the Federal Bureau of Prisons facility in Miami. But before turning himself in, Navarro made these comments.
Every person who has taken me on this road to that prison is a friggin' Democrat and a Trump hater. When I walk in that prison today, the justice system, such as it is, will have done a crippling blow to the constitutional separation of powers and executive privilege. The issues, again, please do your research. It's, can Congress compel someone like me to testify? The answer has been no ever since George Washington said that to the Jay Treaty. What constitutes executive privilege? Is it presumptive? If not presumptive, what is a formal invocation look like? A third issue has to do with the fact, and this should chill you, okay? If you're ever in my position and you have to go to trial, it should chill you to know that the judge has the discretion to strip you of any defense before you ever get to a jury. Think about this. Mr. Woodward files that appeal. It comes into 3 judges. 2 of them are Republican, 1 is a Democrat. We've got your appeal. Time passes, a short period of time, we get the ruling back. Appeal denied. 3 Obama judges on the 3 panels. How did that bait and switch happen? That's supposed to be a random draw. You know what the odds of that are? Less than 20%. That's prison. That's where they take your freedom. But as hard as it will be on me, and as hard as it will be on anybody who is in there, it's harder on their families. And this is who those Democrats have hurt. This is who the Democrats have hurt. I will walk proudly in there and do my time.
Criminal defense attorney Jeff Brown joins me. Jeff, he has pending an appeal and on executive privilege, which has not been resolved. And I don't know if he'll win or not. If he wins, it'd be really bad that he went to jail. If he loses, then, no, it doesn't make a difference. But what do you think about this?
Yeah, I'm always a little upset, I guess you can say, when, you file an appeal. There's no question he has good appellate issues, but he has to serve his sentence, especially a sentence like this, before that appeal is going to be heard. Because how do you unring that bell, so to speak? How do you get back that time if the appellate court rules in his favor? How do you get back the 4 months you did? I don't understand, and this doesn't happen very often, but I don't understand the few times that I've heard that it does, why the court can't just stay everything and let the appeal resolve itself and then decide whether he was right on appeal or wrong on appeal.
Well, looking ahead, I don't know what's going to happen with Hunter Biden. He says he's not going to testify, so he's going to defy a congressional subpoena. And now, of course, it's a Republican Congress, so I guess they'll hold him in contempt of court. And then the question will go with Merrick Garland, whether he will prosecute him like Navarro was prosecuted. Merrick Garland could just not prosecute him. And then, of course, what's profoundly different between the Hunter Biden case and the Navarro case is Navarro actually has a good, as a defense that has been on, that we haven't. He has an issue that we haven't resolved about executive privilege, but Hunter Biden, he doesn't have an executive privilege. He wasn't working at a White House at the time. So it's very different, but we're going to be able to see how even justice is.
Yeah, and that's kind of been the theme you and I have spoken about for, the last 6 or 8 months is, are we applying the laws and what we know about the criminal justice system evenly, regardless of your political party? As you said, Hunter Biden just literally walked away. He just said, I'm just deciding not to testify. He didn't stand by some executive privilege, as Navarro did here. He wasn't invoking some legitimate appellate issues that we need to resolve about executive privilege, about whether or not Congress can subpoena somebody and things like that. Hunter Biden just simply walked away, and then the lawyers tried to claim that he wasn't actually subpoenaed correctly, which was ridiculous. But So yeah, the question's going to be, how do we handle these two cases? Do we handle them the same thing? Over and over again, I hear uniformity, uniformity. That's what all the judges keep telling me. We need to handle all these cases the same. But in reality, we're not. I mean, look at the cases that's gone on with President Trump. We're seeing exceptions made all the time, and everybody wants to kind of look the other way except for you. And that's why, I love talking to you about this, because we're of like mind. We're just asking for the playing field to be the same.
I'm going to take the last word on this, but if the Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court ultimately decide he didn't have an executive privilege, then I wouldn't have a problem with the 4 months. It's just the idea, as you noted, is that they could decide in his favor, because he's working at the White House at the time, that he did, and he can't get your 4 months of freedom back. Jeff Brown, thank you.
Thanks, Greta.
Coming up, a new campaign ad. That when the record continues. As you may remember, we have reported about Timothy the Hippo, who is also running for president. Timothy and his campaign shared this on social media. Check out Timothy's campaign barrel roll dive. Impressive for a president running on a Naps for All campaign, isn't it? Rob Schmidt tonight is up next. Stay on Newsmax all the time.
The left squeals with delight as Trump struggles to pay a ridiculous bond to a ridiculous judge. Let's check it out. Welcome to Rob Schmidt tonight. In case you hadn't noticed, it's a terrible time to be heavily invested in commercial real estate. For 2 years, COVID manic liberals and Democrat politicians destroyed American cities, bullying companies into allowing their workers to sit in their underwear and answer emails in bed. And now bustling cities like New York are only really busy maybe 2-3 days a week, certainly not on Friday and Monday. Commercial real estate is in a very bad place in what could be the catalyst for a larger economic crash likely coming for this debt-ridden country. For decades, former President Trump has been the picture of American commercial real estate success. But currently, Trump's properties, like so many others, have basically halved in value, along with nearly every other commercial building in big blue cities, at least. We told you last night about the Four Seasons in San Francisco, a fully functional hotel being handed back to the bank. Investors just walking away, and this is not the first of these kinds of stories that we have seen. It's insane to think that an investor just hands a building back to a bank. But it is that bad. And we're telling you this because right now the most obnoxious people on the left in this country are spiking the football because former President Trump is struggling to find $500 million for the privilege of appealing Arthur Engoron's insane ruling in New York. This is how they sound.
Donald Trump is finally acknowledging tonight that he does not have the cash that he has long claimed he does.
Donald Trump could be on the verge of being forced to sell his most prized properties.
They have tried to approach about 30 surety companies through 4 separate brokers and cannot get a bond for this amount.
For somebody who brags about his personal wealth as much as he does, who's key to his political appeal is that he can't be bought because he has so much money than everybody else. In this case, what he has more than anybody else is a need for money, quickly and desperately.
The idea that Trump is a billionaire was the original big lie. In fact, it helped make him president. Well, surprise, surprise, it turns out he's not as rich as he claimed to be.
Ah, they're loving this so much. Imagine making fun of somebody for not being liquid enough to cover a $500 million appeals bond. So delusional about Trump, so excited to see a man that they hate so much suffer, that they're oblivious to the damage being done to the entire system by the Democrat Party's useful idiots, and by that I mean these two, people like Letitia James and Arthur Engoron. One thing everybody should know, Arthur Engoron arrived at this ridiculous amount, more than $460 million, via his own calculations. He is a strange bird, as you see here, of the financial benefit that Trump received, he claimed, from attaining lower interest rates from banks after he allegedly overvalued his assets. That's how he came to this number. This is what the Attorney General and the New York legal system are now chasing down and prosecuting, a case this ridiculous, and they expect you to respect them. Now, keep in mind, Deutsche Bank defended Trump in the trial. So Letitia James basically said, even though you're defending Donald Trump, you're still a victim. Trump is a fraud somehow. And even though Deutsche Bank's actuaries agreed and signed off on Trump's loans at the time, they didn't care. This is as despicable as it gets. Arthur Engoron should be disbarred. He is not a judge. And he let somebody as stupid as Tish James run his court and gave her basically everything that she wanted. A woman who only exists, who you only know who she is because of Donald Trump.
I go into my office. I usually sue 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue.
President Trump cannot avoid justice in the great state of New York.
We are prepared to make sure that the judgment is paid to New Yorkers. And yes, I look at 40 Wall Street each and every day.
She's such a humiliation to this country, and she doesn't even know it. And we have normalized this. Something this crazy has been normalized in this country. A recent poll found that half of Americans think Trump is guilty in this New York fraud case. That is the power of this psyop. That's the power a political movement can have when it takes complete control of the establishment media and when ABC and CBS and CNN are just out there parroting their talking points. There are, though, some that are trying to wake this country up. Shark Tank investor Kevin O'Leary was on CNN last night, and he lost it, and he kept it very real. Take a listen.
I think that was a statement that would be much better made sometime in Venezuela. I'm not kidding. That's a scary, scary message. And by the way, there are no such thing as $500 billion bonds. There are no $500 million bonds. Never been done before. Never. This law has never been applied. Forget about Trump. Nothing to do with Trump. Everything to do about America and the New York brand.
That's not some big Trump sycophant either. The point was made. This Get Trump grift is doing far more damage, doing untold damage to this country's reputation, to its functionality, to its future. Our former president, the leading candidate for the White House in the next election, has 5 days now to find $500 million in cash, with a portfolio of assets that are valued at about half of what they were 5 years ago. Many likely already leveraged to some extent. Without the cash, he can't appeal and would be forced to fire sale some assets to sharks out there who know that he is desperate. That, or Letitia James says she's going to start seizing his assets, a process based on New York's assessments of what they're worth. So what, Mar-a-Lago is really only worth $18 million when they steal it from him? They can take all of it. Here's a video I shot myself, my favorite golf course. This is Trump, Los Angeles. That's close to 100 acres on the Pacific Ocean. I used to play here all the time when I lived out there. It's probably the most beautiful golf course I've ever seen. Tish James will probably say it's worth $4 million, and she's going to try and take everything he has to get to $463 million. And we're going to get to watch Tish James, the picture of our humiliating American decline, waddle herself into Trump Tower surrounded by a giggling media. She'll walk up to the podium and start gloating and screaming about protecting democracy while commandeering a former president's private property. Grant Cardone is a real estate investor who says he is done with New York after seeing this spectacle. And we're happy to have you on tonight, sir. It's good to see you. Watching what these people are capable of, catapulted into power by the brainless electorates in these miserable blue states, it is terrifying to see what they can do.
As a property owner, listening to you has made me sick to my stomach and reinforced my decision not to invest in New York, California, Illinois. You could throw them all together. I mean, this is basically a shakedown on Trump or any property owner, seizure of assets, a sanction on a contributing, forget that he's former president, a contributing member of society that has invested his entire career in New York, versus the same city gives sanctuary to people that came here illegally. It's why we decided to pull out of all New York transactions 3 weeks ago. 3 weeks later, 21 days later, yesterday, I placed $300 million in Florida to invest that could have gone to New York City.
300 million is the loss for New York based on this, and let's not pretend that you're the only one that's doing this.
No, I'm not. Look, that 300 million hires property managers, leasing agents, provides places for people to live, produces tremendous amount of tax and revenue, not just the transaction itself, but it gives people a place to live. It appreciates the value of the other properties in those neighborhoods.
Yeah.
And I'm going to do this in Chicago. Like in Chicago, on any given weekend, they can just raise taxes there. Los Angeles went from a 1% property tax to 5.5% overnight and destroyed property values in LA County. This is insane. This is being done. And it's not just Donald Trump that it affects, but every American who owns any property.
No, it's mayhem. And I think a lot of people are waking up to that. It shouldn't surprise anybody that he's had a hard time finding somebody to give him this money for the bond. I mean, he's dealing with a New York court that's shown its willingness to bastardize all legal norms to destroy him. So an investment into this bond is very dangerous. And obviously his real estate is worth a lot less than it was 5 years ago. They're so happy to see him struggling in this moment. A $500 million bond to appeal. I mean, who the hell has that kind of money?
It's a sanction. It's a sanction. This is what was done to Putin and those guys over there that were part of, this is what America tried to do to Russia. This would only be seen with us doing to another country and not done to a property owner. So for those people, by the way, that voted and said 50% of the people think that Trump did something, none of them are property owners.
Right.
It is impossible for them to own any property and see this as a legitimate action. And what he did with the valuation of his properties is done by every investor on every deal, every transaction. That is, I believe my property is worth one amount. The appraiser believes another. The marketplace, by the way, in the last 10 years has believed it was worth more than I even thought it was worth. And
then the fact that the governor came out right after. And to ease anxious people like you to say, oh, we're not going after anybody else. We're only going after Trump. That just solidified exactly what this is, that this is purely politics, that they just hate this person. And it showed that, I mean, this should all just be thrown out. But in the meantime, he's got to come up with $460 million for the privilege of being able to appeal something this ridiculous.
He probably has the money, but, the best place to negotiate from is the place of I don't have it.
Yeah, right.
If he has it, then he can't negotiate.
Right. And I think so, too. I think a lot of this is just a ploy to see how far are they willing to take this. I mean, are you going to come over here? I mean, is Tish James really stupid enough, and I think she might be, to actually try and seize assets from a former president? Because if she does, Trump is going to win New York State in November.
100%. Like, these people have gone way too far. This started back in COVID. They went too far with the pressing of the mandates of the mask, the vaccines. New York City, Illinois, Los Angeles County have sold more real estate in my state, in Florida. They have been responsible for more real estate transactions than all the real estate agents combined in the state of Florida. This is an insanity. Not only are people moving out of New York, but money to invest is now not going to that city. And this is from all over the world. I know people in China, Canada, all across Europe, South America that want to invest in America. They don't want to touch these states right now.
Yeah.
On any given day, they can raise the taxes. They can pass a law that says I can't evict a tenant, a bad actor.
Yeah.
I can't collect my rents. They can stop my rental growth and say I can't raise rents. This is insane. It is communism. It is socialism.
Yeah. This is how you take out a political opponent. You use the systems. You try and buy credibility by controlling the media. I mean, we have no establishment media left in this country. They can watch this and just validate it somehow. I mean, these people, we've completely lost that, and they're selling out decades of credibility, to usher this thing through and to get Trump out of here. I don't think it's going to work this time. We got to leave it there. Grant Cardone, we appreciate you coming on, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, man. Appreciate you.
All right, huge news for the state of Texas coming out. The Supreme Court ruling the state can immediately begin arresting and detaining people suspected of crossing the Texas-Mexico border illegally. This just came out a couple hours ago. The law known as SB 4, signed by Governor Greg Abbott in December, an effort to stem the tide of illegal immigrants that are overtaking his state. The U.S. government has abandoned its duty to protect your country. The law allows state judges to issue deportation orders against those suspected of violating the law by entering illegally. The Supreme Court allowing this law to be imposed as the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals considers the measure's legality. Arguments set for tomorrow in the case. But in the meantime, in Texas, they can start arresting and they can start deporting anybody that comes across that border illegally in the state of Texas, because the federal government is not. So that's at least some good news for that state. We'll have a lot more on that coming up tomorrow. All right, it is primary night in 5 states. I want to do a quick check with our national correspondent, Mike Carter. Mike, go ahead.
Thanks, Rob. Well, voters, as you just said, in 5 states heading to the polls today in presidential primaries, including former President Trump and former First Lady Melania, who cast their ballots in Florida's Republican presidential primary earlier today in Palm Beach. Trump expected to be the projected winner in the Sunshine State tonight, and right now, Donald Trump is up big time on Nikki Haley. There you have it, nearly 50-point lead for the former president. For the latest, let's go to senior correspondent John Huddy, who's live for us in Boca Raton. John?
Yeah, good evening, Mike. As you noted, former President Trump voted this afternoon at his local polling precinct in Palm Beach, close to his Mar-a-Lago residence. He made some remarks afterwards with former First Lady Melania Trump by his side. We haven't really seen much of her on the campaign trail, but Trump called Peter Navarro a, quote, great patriot, and that the Democrats have been, quote, very, very opposed to Jewish people and to Israel, really doubling down on some of the comments he made Monday. He also said this about the possibility of his assets being taken in New York and the fallout, as we were just talking about, the civil fraud case. Listen here.
I built a great company, one of the greatest companies anywhere in the country, especially when it comes to real estate. And this is a rigged trial. This was a rigged trial by a crooked judge and a crooked attorney general.
Now, that said, the former First Lady was asked if she would be appearing on the campaign trail with her husband, to which she responded, quote, stay tuned. And we are staying tuned to the results in Florida, showing that former President Trump is unsurprisingly well ahead at this point. Also, the what are called down ballot races in Ohio and Illinois as well, Mike. Back to you.
Thank you, John, for that. We'll be checking back with you when polls close in Florida, as well as John Glasgow, who's going to be at Cary Lake's headquarters out in Arizona tonight. Thank you for being with us. I'm Mike Carter.
All right, former senior Trump aide Peter Navarro turned himself into a Miami federal jail today. An act of defiance against the tyranny that we're seeing in Washington is why he is there. 74-year-old Navarro will spend the next 4 months imprisoned for defying the January 6 kangaroo court, unwilling to testify before a fraudulent panel that was posing as some sort of congressional committee to investigate and find justice. Navarro filed a last-ditch motion to delay serving time while the appeals process played out. The Supreme Court denied him. Navarro spoke earlier today before he went in. Here's what he said.
Every person who has taken me on this road to that prison is a friggin' Democrat and a Trump hater. It starts with House Speaker Nancy Pelosi, who forms the J6 committee, blows away all the rules, improperly constituted, unduly authorized, and unlawful committee. She puts on 7 Democrats. Every single one of them, fact check it, every single one of those went after Donald Trump through 2 impeachments and the Russia hoax, and all they want to do is stop Trump.
Navarro attempted to assert executive privilege to block testifying in front of the J6 committee over communications he had with Trump on January 6th in the 2020 election. It was a committee which never should have had any power to begin with, as Nancy Pelosi refused to allow 2 sides, as we know. A House GOP report from Georgia Congressman Barry Loudermilk exposed the committee for deleting at least 117 encrypted files that they used during this fake investigation. The committee hid evidence that exonerated former President Trump. The Secret Service denying that Trump lunged for the wheel of the beast, which is what we heard from Cassidy Hutchinson, and Chief of Staff Anthony Ornato, who said under oath that he listened to former Chief of Staff Mark Meadows over the phone urging D.C.'s Mayor Muriel Bowser to request 10,000 National Guard troops on January 6th, which the D.C. mayor never did. These things completely negate the entire messaging of this story. They were not allowed to be heard. They were shoved into a box and said, nobody can see this. Trump attorney Jesse Binnall joins us now along with Hogan Gidley. Gentlemen, good to see you both. Jesse, your reaction, Peter Navarro going in today.
Well, unfortunately, it's another example of the two different systems of justice that we see in this country right now. You see when Eric Holder is found in contempt of Congress, the Department of Justice did absolutely nothing. When you see other people on the left that completely ignore congressional subpoenas from properly authorized congressional subpoenas, there's no accountability. However, you get this this committee authorized, and Mr. Navarro is exactly right. And I think that we are seeing right now Congress is going to disavow much of the work of the January 6th committee. But the left-wingers don't care. And unfortunately, right now, it's almost impossible for someone in Mr. Navarro's shoes to get a fair shake in Washington, D.C. Yeah. And so these two different systems of justice, it's just very unfortunate right now, but that's the country that we're living in.
It certainly is. And Jesse, I just want to go to you for one more, and then we'll get to Hogan here for a second. But Navarro tweeted today that John Roberts, Supreme Court Justice, took care to note that the reason for his denial was distinct from his pending appeal on the merits. I speak to that if you can. Is there hope of some kind of an appeal? I mean, it seems obvious that this committee should have never had the powers that it had.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And I mean, Peter Navarro has some of the best lawyers in all of Washington, D.C. They are excellent. And they will take and continue this appeal. Asking for an emergency stay like this, both to the D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals and the Supreme Court, it's a long shot bid. It's very, very rare that such bids are granted. But the appeal itself that will go to the D.C. Circuit first and then can go back to the Supreme Court is an extremely strong appeal. And, I suspect there's a very strong chance that he is going to be victorious in the end. Unfortunately, it's going to be after he's gone through his full 4-month prison term, which is just absolutely wrong.
Right. Yeah, Hogan, to illustrate how insane this is, for everybody out there, imagine Trump wins the White House. Republicans win the House and the Senate. Trump puts Matt Whitaker as Attorney General or somebody like him. Speaker Johnson assembles an all-Republican panel to continue investigating Biden corruption. No Democrats, no dissenting voices. They demand Hunter and Joe Biden testify, and if they decline, Whitaker throws them both in jail. Imagine how the media would react to that.
Oh, they'd lose their minds. I mean, that's obvious because the two-tier justice system doesn't even begin to describe it. Think about the people out there roaming the streets in Washington, D.C. alone, not to mention New York, Chicago, other major cities, who are in this country illegally, committing armed robbery, rape, murder, burglaries, aggravated assaults. Those people are being let out by district attorneys. But no, let's go after a 70-plus-year-old man like Peter Navarro when you don't go after Eric Holder, when you don't go after Hunter Biden. Democrats consistently shun Congress, and they just, get praised by the liberal media, by the legacy media, as if they're standing up for what's right. This is so insane, and the more this happens in real time, the more the American people get to see what a weaponized Department of Justice, what weaponized three-letter agencies, what a weaponized federal government can do to anybody in this country, not just Donald Trump, but anybody else. The more concerned they are going to be, the more they are going to rally around anyone like Donald Trump who pledges to stop it. He knows where the bodies are buried now. He knows how this whole apparatus works against so many in this country who just disagree with the federal government politically. Now he knows exactly what to do with it. They are terrified that Donald Trump will be reelected president.
They're making it easier with this nonsense. Hogan Gidley and Jesse Binnall, thank you both. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Thank you.
All right, rough day for George Stephanopoulos and ABC News. Trump filing a much-anticipated defamation lawsuit against the network and its big Sunday host after Stephanopoulos asserted a couple of different times in an interview with Congresswoman Nancy Mace that Trump was found liable for raping E. Jean Carroll. Here were those moments from last week. Take a look.
Endorsed Donald Trump for president. Judges and 2 separate juries have found him liable for rape and for defaming the victim of that rape. How do you square your endorsement of Donald Trump with the testimony we just saw?
Well, I will tell you, I was raped at the age of 16. It's a shame that you will never feel, George, and I'm not going to sit here on your show and be asked a question meant to shame me about another potential rape victim. I'm not gonna do that.
It's actually not about shaming you. It's a question about Donald
Trump.
No,
you are shaming me.
You've endorsed Donald Trump for president.
Right.
Donald Trump has been found liable for rape by a jury.
2 times, he says it in 30 seconds. In truth, the jury actually rejected the rape accusation, which George knows. Instead, found Trump liable for the lesser charge of sexual abuse, which, whatever, the whole thing is so outrageous. In a 20-page complaint, Trump's attorney accused Stephanopoulos of making false and defamatory statements with actual malice or with a reckless disregard for the truth that were distributed widely to third parties and repeated. As a journalist at ABC for 27 years now, a network overflowing with way too many producers and fact-checkers, you'd think that if Stephanopoulos actually knows that he made a mistake, he would have at least corrected it on the air. That didn't happen. Not that day or any day since. The lawsuit says Trump reached out to ABC seeking a retraction, an apology. ABC said nothing. Nothing in response. Just totally ignored it. The network didn't even ask Stephanopoulos to correct his false statements, and he's on TV pretty much every single day between the morning show and on Sunday. We've reached out to ABC for a comment. They have said nothing. ABC News. Congresswoman Nancy Mace joins us again tonight to talk more about this. It's good to have you back on. And this all stemmed from an interview with you, obviously, where Stephanopoulos tried to shame you for your support of Trump and create an image of Trump as a rapist, despite the fact that these allegations against him were too weak for even a left-wing Manhattan jury to believe. Your reaction to Stephanopoulos has just totally blown this off. What do you think?
Well, absolutely. George Stephanopoulos had multiple opportunities to retract his statements in the interview that I had with him, as I rebuffed him live on national TV on air, because what he wasn't saying was the truth. And what I tried to say and correct him on air was that Donald Trump was not convicted of rape or sexual assault in a criminal court. Donald Trump was not held liable for rape or sexual assault, despite the mainstream media's lies and overwhelming effort to be political hacks and try to sway an election with absolute, complete lies. And so what we're seeing today is a downfall of mainstream media. I hope that Bob Iger gets a grip of ABC News. They're completely out of control. These are people that want to take politics over facts. They want to take, they won't tell the truth. They refuse to tell the truth. They take talking points over the truth. And here's a guy, basically George Stephanopoulos, trying to be this beacon of truth, a beacon of journalism. The guy is not fit to hold a microphone, let alone be the voice of truth here, because all he does is tell lies.
Yeah, well, I mean, when he was hired, I mean, it irked everybody when I couldn't believe when ABC hired him for something like this, because he was so obviously a political actor. I mean, he was Clinton's guy, and as we talked about, he went after Clinton's accusers, viciously went after Clinton's accusers, and then after your appearance on the show, you made a lot of noise about this, but it's the machine that we're in is so good at ignoring anything that doesn't help their cause, and you were silenced. I mean, it didn't go anywhere. Your calls for any kind of, I guess, apology from George Stephanopoulos, nothing happened with that.
And quite frankly, Republicans should boycott ABC News until George Stephanopoulos is held accountable for the egregious lies he purposely told on air on ABC News this week. I'm glad that Donald Trump is suing ABC News, and I hope he sues him for every single penny. Maybe $454 million sounds about right for that. I'm going to tell the truth. Donald Trump is going to tell the truth, and we're not going to take it from a bridge troll with a microphone like George Stephanopoulos.
And isn't it something that, again, not to reemphasize it, but the fact that this guy, spent so many years shaming the accusers of his former boss,
covering up
and for him to covering up, and then he comes to you and he tries to guilt you on his show, to have that kind of audacity, to have that kind of comfort in knowing that you're so protected because you're on the right team in this country, right? He's on the right team. Nothing's going to happen to him.
Yeah, that's right. And when the left shows you who they are, we ought to believe them. They don't respect women. They don't respect rape survivors. I've had so many threats on my life over the last week. Even on Friday night, someone was arrested for a grave threat against me and my children and members of my family. They are absolutely insane, and we can't tolerate, we can't take it. And I hope that the mainstream media will look at this and say we're gonna do better. But it's going to take Republicans taking a hard line. They need to boycott, stay off ABC News until they do something about the lies that George Stephanopoulos has told. We need to boycott them.
Yeah, you're right. Republicans are never very good about that. Conservatives just don't think that way, but that's the way it is. Congressman, we appreciate you coming back on, though. It's good to see you as always.
Thank you.
All right, as we watch the far left rally and rage over Gaza and demand an end to the apartheid state of Israel, the same people that lit cities ablaze in the summer of 2020, many Jewish voters have awakened to the last 6 months, or in the last 6 months, I should say, many now seeing just how dangerous the left is becoming in this country. In New York, polling indicates former President Trump could win the Jewish vote, which would just be an astonishing political shift. But many Jewish voters will still somehow vote for the same politicians as the woke army looking to destroy their homeland. They're going to align with these same people, even after what we've seen over the last 6 months. In truth, Israel is actually the most vivid example of the supposed inequities and racism that the American left is pushing today. As a Jewish American, if you support the equity agenda that the left now pushes constantly, you're basically calling for the dismantling of your own homeland, whether you like it or not. Those are tough words to hear, but it's pretty much how it is. It's something that former President Trump pointed out on our friend Sebastian Gorka's radio show last night.
I actually think they hate Israel.
Yes.
I don't think they hate him. I think they hate Israel. And the Democrat Party hates Israel. Again, when you see those Palestinian marches, even I'm amazed at how many people are in those marches. And guys like Schumer see that. And to him, it's votes. I think it's votes more than anything else. Any Jewish person that votes for Democrats hates their religion. They hate everything about Israel, and they should be ashamed of themselves because Israel would be destroyed.
Oh, and of course, the usual suspects went berserk over that comment.
This is anti-Semitic garbage. That's why we're bringing it up. To tell somebody that they hate their entire religion unless you support their politics or their political party.
It's not a joke.
I think out of all the things that Donald Trump has ever said that have offended my core, this is it. How dare you, Donald Trump, tell me what it takes to be a good Jew?
It's just so offensive for someone to tell me what it means to be a good Jew. It is just, it's so beyond the pale.
From the people that are offended every single day by every single thing that happens. KT McFarland, Trump's Deputy National Security Advisor, joins us now, along with Dennis Prager. Good to have you both on. Dennis, you're a Jewish conservative. I just want to start with your reaction to the former president's comments on the Gorka show.
There's a lot to say, and I know we don't have a lot of time. I've written a book on anti-Semitism. It's in its 3rd edition. It is one of the most widely used texts explaining anti-Semitism. It's called Why the Jews. I am a religious Jew. I have worked to help the Jewish people and Israel all of my life. The use of the term anti-Semite or anti-Semitism when it is not applicable simply undoes the battle against real anti-Semitism.
Exactly.
The words are over the top. Had he said left and not Democrat, I would agree with that. Leftism is the antithesis of Judaism, literally the antithesis. Liberalism is not. And many Democrats still think of themselves as liberals. And I have worked hard, both with my fellow Jews and my fellow Americans who are not Jewish, to make a distinction between liberalism and leftism. Why liberals vote for a left-wing party is a function of habit, brainwash, and naivete. But I will say I wish he had said Jews who support the left are hurting Israel. That's a fact.
Certainly. I mean, and it's, you know, to those that are offended, and obviously we know what I think he was trying to get across. And he used, you know, perhaps the wrong wording there. But just speak about, I mean, and Dennis, to stay with you just for one more second, just speak about the reality. They can be as offended as they want. But this is, over the last 6 months, if this isn't painfully clear, if the fact that Trump is leading in the polls amongst Jewish New Yorkers doesn't tell people something, when are they going to wake up to the fact that the party that they used to love and support is very, very different than it used to be? And this is going to eat them. You know, I mean, it's coming for them. It's not just coming for, you know, whoever the, you know, whatever the wokies used to believe were the bad guys. Now it's coming for them as well.
Well, the left has told the president that the Muslim vote in Dearborn, Michigan, might swing the state of Michigan, and so he and the left wing of his party are more concerned with that and winning Michigan than they are with the health and welfare of Israel. Look, is there a Republican equivalent to Bernie Sanders in antipathy to Israel, or the 6, I think, senators who signed the statement against Israel? The notion, which was said correctly by Seb Gorka, they don't hate Netanyahu, they hate Israel. And there's proof, because the opposition, this is critical, the opposition in Israel, the left-wing opposition in Israel has said, we will do the exact same war. We will prosecute the same war in Gaza as Netanyahu, whom they loathe, is prosecuting.
Yeah.
This is a war for Israel's survival. Yeah. This is not a war for Netanyahu.
That's exactly right. KT, I want to get your thoughts.
You know, this has nothing to do with Israel. It has nothing to do with Donald Trump and the Democrats. And as Dennis said, it has everything to do with the Muslim American voters, the 10, 20,000 Muslim American voters who are going to make the difference on who gets to win the most extraordinary state that they have to win. A Democrat has to win Michigan if he's going to win the White House. So Joe Biden is willing to put the fate of Israel on the rack. You know, he's more concerned with those 10 or 20,000 votes he's going to maybe get or maybe not going to get in Michigan than he is what's happening to the Middle East. Cut through all the rhetoric. Donald Trump is a very frank man, and he speaks his mind. But look at what he's done for the state of Israel. What has he done? He's moved the American embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. He supported Israel throughout with weapons, with a lot of favorable economic situation and trade issues. And then, most importantly, he hammered out the Abraham Accords, which is the first time that Jews have had peace in the Middle East for hundreds of years. They had peace with the Arabs and the Sunni Arabs. Right. That's a huge, huge, huge deal. So all this other stuff, it's just a smokescreen. It's a smokescreen for the rank political opportunism of the Democrats and President Biden himself. And it's a smokescreen so that nobody wants to pay any attention on the left of actually how good Donald Trump has been for the state of Israel.
Yeah, and Dennis, I love what you said about the abuse of the word anti-Semitic, because I completely agree. And it reminds me of what happened with Elon Musk back in November when he responded to a tweet, and that tweet read, Jewish communities have been pushing the exact kind of dialectical hatred against whites that they claim to want people to stop using against them. And Elon actually tweeted support of that, saying, you have said the actual truth. The point of that was that the West is full of radical left, equity-obsessed, woke Jewish people who loved all of that nonsense until after October 7th, when it arrived at their door.
This is a very painful subject. As a committed Jew who was founded a synagogue in Los Angeles, and worked to fight anti-Semitism my whole life. But I wrote this in one of my columns. Jews who support the left, and it's very important to note that way more members of other groups have supported the left than Jews. But certainly there is a disproportionate number of Jews who have supported the left. And now the left has turned out to loathe that little sanctuary of Jewry, of Holocaust survivors, the size of New Jersey, called Israel. And now they're shocked. Gee, the people we thought we were, and this is all over the Jewish press, in the Forward, which is a left-wing Jewish paper. They have article after article that the Jews have been bitten by the people they thought they were their allies. But why did Jews think that the left was their allies? This is a very painful subject. And if Jews are doing what is known in Hebrew as cheshbon hanefesh, an accounting of the soul over the appeal of leftism, this might be a great moment in American Jewish history.
Well said. Got to end on a final question for KT. Interview with Nigel Farage, Trump, and I want to talk, obviously about NATO and the world. This is where your expertise lies. Trump says he won't quit NATO if Europe pays its way. And KT, as his Deputy National Security Advisor, your thoughts on that comment?
Donald Trump has been a supporter of NATO, but what he really wants is the NATO allies to do their fair share. In fact, if you want to say who's really in favor of a strong NATO, it's a guy who says to the NATO allies, you better stand up and pay your fair share. NATO will only be strong if we're all in it together. NATO will not exist if it's just an American checkbook that's trying to support and defend everybody else. So in fact, when Donald Trump sort of rails against the people in European countries, particularly Germany, that aren't paying their fair share, that's the point he's trying to make. Yeah. Pay your fair share. We're all in this together. Then we stand up to Russia. We stand up to everybody, but you've got to do your fair share, which you are able to do, and we've got to do it together.
They call it tough love. It makes these countries stronger. It's tough love. That's the way it is. It's well said. Two of the smartest people that are ever on this show, KT McFarland, Dennis Prager. Good to see you guys. Thank you so much. Explosive hearing today on America's most humiliating moment under Joe Biden, the Afghanistan withdrawal, which saw the complete collapse of the Afghan government in no time at all after propping it up for 20 years. 13 of our soldiers killed at Abbey Gate, a moment we'll never forget, due to complete incompetence, all at the very top. The Afghan withdrawal also saw countless American citizens and Afghan civilians who helped our forces during 20 years of war left behind. Former Joint Chiefs General Mark Milley and former Commander of U.S. CENTCOM Kenneth McKenzie say that Tony Blinken and the Biden State Department are the ones to blame.
On 14 August, the non-combatant evacuation operation decision was made by the Department of State, and the U.S. military alerted, marshaled, mobilized, and rapidly deployed faster than any military in the world could ever do. It is my assessment that that decision came too late.
I believe that the events of mid and late August 2021 were the direct result of delaying the initiation of the NEO for several months. In fact, until we were in extremis and the Taliban had overrun the country. As you are aware, the decision to begin a NEO rests with the Department of State, not the Department of Defense.
General Milley continued to expose the incompetence of this withdrawal by admitting he did not know the number of Americans and Afghans who assisted our troops who were either left behind or killed.
And I'll be candid, I don't know the exact number of Americans that were left behind because the starting number was never clear. Same is true of at-risk Afghans, SIVs, the commandos, other Afghans that served with us. Those numbers varied so widely that they were quite inaccurate. I think some of the Afghans were tracked down that worked with us, and I think some of them were killed, and I'm pretty certain some of them in pretty brutal ways.
All that money we spend on defense, and that's what we get back. Darren Hoover is a Gold Star father who lost his son, Marine Staff Sergeant Taylor Hoover, at Abbey Gate, and he joins us tonight once again, along with Congressman Rich McCormick, who was at today's House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing. Gentlemen, good to see you both. And Darren, I want to start with you. General McKenzie addressed Abbey Gate in his opening statement, claiming that while in command, that he prevented more Abbey Gates from happening and that he was proud of that. I want to play that moment here really quick and get your reaction on the other side.
We avoided a number of potential Abbey Gate attacks, and I'm proud of the commanders and troops who prevented them. This is small comfort to those who lost loved ones, and I realize this. Nonetheless, what's remarkable about Kabul is not that the tragedy of Abbey Gate happened, but that many other attacks did not happen.
Sir, I'd just like to get your response to that.
If he was so forceful with that there were other Abbey Gate attacks that were not because of what happened, then why on earth were we still at that gate, still moving forward? And, you know, it's just, he was full of lies today. It's incredible how much he did lie and got caught in it several times. He wasn't called out very much, but he was caught in several lies. And I can't help but think that this is one of those.
Congressman, your assessment of what we saw today and the blame they're trying to stick to the State Department, which no doubt deserves some blame.
Oh, well, it starts at the very top. The commander-in-chief gets to call all the shots. Yeah. If he disseminates any sort of decision-making, delegates any decision-making, it's by his authority. It's his plan. It's his advisors. It's his hand-chosen people, whether it be Secretary of State, Secretary of Defense, the people he's appointed as the Joint Chiefs of Staff. It's his decision, ultimately, how to run this war. He made multiple choices, errors. It resulted in the death of 13 members. It resulted in the death of several allied forces. It resulted in the crumbling of a nation that now harbors 27 military training facilities for terrorists with $7.2 billion worth of our military equipment to enrich their capabilities. This is all on him. This could have all been avoided. We had the country secured. Was it perfect? Absolutely not. Was the government corrupt? Absolutely was. But we had a country under control that we had paid the price for. $2 trillion, 20 years, 2,462 lives, and now we're right back where we started.
Yeah, and it was so fast. It happened like that. And somehow none of these people saw it coming, which was the most embarrassing part. Again, how much money do we spend to send to this government for this incompetence? You know, we learned today from Congressman Michael Waltz, Mr. Hoover, that Tony Blinken was evidently in the Hamptons in August, the day before Kabul fell. Your reaction to that?
You know, it just goes back to what Congressman McCormick just said. It goes back to the top. If the Secretary of State cannot be in at least D.C., at least in some position where he can make those calls and take those calls instead of being on vacation. It needs to be there. I mean, my goodness, the fall of Kabul was happening from the 15th of August up into and including the day that our kids were killed. And for the secretary to be on vacation is absolutely unconscionable. It blows my mind. It staggers my mind that was the case, and that still none of these people have been held to account for the actions that they took on that day.
Right. And Congressman, the fact that Tony Blinken still has a job, that this administration is just that ridiculous, that to just leave him there.
To say that it's unpredictable is absolutely a lie. Yeah. Everybody knew what was going to happen. Everybody knew that the Afghani government couldn't withstand any sort of assault by the Taliban as soon as we withdrew. This should be predictable. Even if you're going to decide, I'm going to desert these people after the huge investment, after we paid the price, if you know that, you should prepare for that. It doesn't mean you go on vacation. It doesn't mean you take it lightly. You can see every single day the deteriorating situation. You could see that they weren't going to last. You should have at least done the logistic point. When Millie said this was a logistic success, are you kidding me? Leaving behind $7.2 billion worth of military equipment, some of it brand new, giving the ability to see at night with brand new night vision goggles, leaving behind H-60s and light armor vehicles and Humvees and M16s and ammunition. Are you kidding me? This is ridiculous. And you're right. Nobody was held accountable. Shame on us.
Shame on us. Well said, sir. Shame on us. That's exactly it. Congressman, we appreciate your time. Mr. Hoover, thank you so much for your time, and thank you for your son. And we appreciate it, sir. All right, quick update. We already have a nominee in this thing, we know that, but we can now project that former President Trump is going to easily cruise to victory in the state of Ohio. There's only 2% of the votes in. This will probably get a lot worse. Trump at 70 points, Nikki Haley at 25. Let's go back to Mike Carter at the desk with more on this. Mike, go ahead.
Hey, good evening again, Rob. Well, in Ohio, we do have new results, as you can see on your screen right there. Joe Biden Newsmax can project, will win the Ohio Democrat primary tonight. On the Republican side, as Rob just mentioned, Donald Trump will win Ohio as well. But a key race we're watching and tracking tonight is Ohio's Republican Senate primary between Trump-endorsed Bernie Moreno and Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRosa and State Senator Matt Dolan. For the latest on that, let's go now to senior correspondent John Huddy in Florida. John.
Yeah, hey, Mike. After getting Donald Trump's endorsement over the weekend, as we saw, businessman and former car dealership owner here in Florida, Bernie Moreno, really shot to the forefront of what's been a pretty contentious primary race there in Ohio. He's facing, as you mentioned, State Senator Matt Dolan, whose family owns the Cleveland Guardians, and Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose. Dolan and Moreno were very close in the latest polls leading up into tonight's primary. Right now, with only 3% of the precincts reported, Moreno is ahead, albeit a couple percentage points, but he's still in the lead at that point. This point, obviously, that could all change. We are also following some of the what's called down ballot races in some of the other states. In Illinois, we're watching the 12th congressional district race between Representative Mike Boss, who's up against State Senator Darren Bailey. Also in Illinois, we're following the 4th congressional district race where Democratic Chicago Alderman Raymond Lopez, who's been very critical of the Biden administration's handling of the border. I've interviewed him. He's been on shows here on Newsmax. He's challenging incumbent Democratic Representative Jesus Chuy Garcia. So we're going to see how that plays out. So stay tuned on that. Mike.
All right. Thank you, John Huddy. And stick around for continuing election coverage throughout the night right here on Newsmax. I'm Mike Carter. Rob, back to you.
All right. Mike and John, thank you guys so much. All right. A confused Joe Biden chases after the wrong woman. We've got some good video next in News from the Left. Welcome back. Time now for News from the Left. Biden may have angered the wifey poo at an event on Monday. Joe getting in very close with another woman at the end of a Women's History Month reception at the White House. Jill then jumps over to take control along with a very anxious-looking chief of staff immediately following this moment. Let's go ahead and play it out for you so you can watch. Okay, so we just want to take you through it one more time just to show you kind of what happened. He's talking to some other lady. We don't know who that is. And let's bring it back up full again, actually, just to show you. He's leaning in a little close there. Kamala has no idea what she's doing. And then just a little bit too long. Jill, Joe, what the hell are you doing? And here comes the chief of staff with him. Come with me, Joe. Go this way. Go this way. And Joe goes, I'm tired of you. I'm going this way. I like her better. Wandering around the stage. Nobody knows what's going on. Chief of staff following behind, everybody confused. That wasn't the only fun moment. Biden also forgot to acknowledge his 5th granddaughter at the event, saying he sees a future for his 4 incredible granddaughters, including 4-year-old Navy Joan Roberts, ignoring, I should say, Navy Joan Roberts, the daughter that Hunter had with the dancer of the night. Biden was forced to publicly acknowledge the existence of Navy last year after Hunter was forced to settle his case, his child support case with London Roberts. He was trying to not pay for the beautiful little girl. Good guy, Hunter Biden. Good family. Next up, after disappearing for 6 years, Kavanaugh accuser Christine Blasey Ford is everywhere again, back in the spotlight just in time for another election, and of course she has a book. Today, The View brought her on to promote the book, where she recounts how she was allegedly sexually assaulted by Trump-nominated Supreme Court Justice Brett Kavanaugh more than 40 years ago, although it was never reported.
Even today, some people remain skeptical of your story. And you write that during the hearing, Senator Lindsey Graham wouldn't even make eye contact with you. Were you prepared for that kind of response?
I was prepared ahead of time that none of the Republicans were going to speak with me.
After all that you've been through, do you have any regrets? Would you do it all the same again?
I would definitely do it again. It was the worst thing ever.
To this day, there is still no evidence beyond her claims that this actually happened. According to multiple reports, her own father actually supported Kavanaugh's confirmation. The Federalist reporting in 2019 that Ralph Blasey approached Brett Kavanaugh's dad at a golf club and expressed his strong support for Kavanaugh throughout the confirmation process. That's the father of this woman. Blasey Ford's attorney also admitted that disrupting Kavanaugh's confirmation was a politically motivated effort to protect Roe versus Wade. She told women at a feminist conference in 2019, when he takes a scalpel to Roe versus Wade, we'll know who he is. We know his character. We know what motivates him and what is important, and it is important that we know. And that is part of what motivated Christine. Well, no kidding. So now the question becomes, for The View, when is Tara Reade going to get the big invite from the guy that just spoke at the women's conference at the White House yesterday? Next up, the social media account for the Biden-Harris campaign attempting to troll Trump's Truth Social posts are playing the same game Bette Midler played last week, reposting this thing where you ask, are you better off 4 years ago than, or are you better off now than you were 4 years ago? And this is Trump actually posting it. And the Biden-Harris campaign responding with yes, and they show pictures of empty shelves during COVID and headlines about homicides being up in 2020 during the Democrats' manufactured summer of chaos. So they finally found the one time when right now is actually better than it was. And of course, it was during a once every century pandemic, and thanks to crime and chaos that they implemented to try and destabilize the country to get Trump reelected. Nice politics. Next up, according to a new study from Media Research Center, Google has interfered with U.S. elections 41 times since 2008 with the intentions of helping Democrats to win. Citing examples appearing to favor Obama over John McCain in 2008, which it was so obvious. Everybody was in the Obama tank. And obviously suppressing critical information of the Biden family leading up to the 2020 election. But don't you dare ask any questions about the outcomes of our elections, or they're going to call you a traitor. And finally, more than a year since the Queen of England died, Trump has a theory that the Queen finally passed at such an old age after such an amazing life because of a broken heart after what Meghan Markle and her boneheaded grandson did to her, abandoning the family and calling everybody racist.
I would imagine they broke her heart. The things that they were saying were so bad and so horrible. And she was in her 90s and hearing this stuff. I think they broke her heart.
No, it was horrible.
I think they really hurt her.
Yeah, I'd say so. You know, grandson goes off and marries this absolutely terrible woman that calls her whole family racist and plays the victim and tries to get rich and does all the things that Meghan Markle did. I'd say that's a pretty fair assessment. Lawfare even more egregious than Trump's. That's next. And finally, on this Tuesday night, it's not just happening in the U.S. with Trump. Political persecution at its finest happening in Brazil. Former Brazilian President Jair Bolsonaro, they called him the Brazilian Trump, indicted earlier today for allegedly falsifying his own vaccination data during COVID. Yes, the former president has been indicted for having a fake vax card, which is something that tons of people did. Bolsonaro rightly railed against mandatory vaccinations. His conservative policies made him enemies both at home and abroad. The globalists did not like this man, and they have many ways to take them down. And this ultimately cost him his reelection, much like with Trump. The people love him there. I mean, have you seen the rallies that he has and the crowds that get together to support him? The indictment alleges Bolsonaro fabricated his and his daughter's vaccination cards before they entered the U.S. in 2022. At the time, U.S. only granted entry to foreigners if they were vaccinated. At the time of the trip, the U.S. had an exemption for people on diplomatic or official foreign government travel, but according to the CDC, prosecutors say Bolsonaro was not on official business with no scheduled meetings. So this is what's happening in Brazil, the country where gangs regularly block highways and just rob every single car systematically one by one, maybe kidnap a few women at the same time. What they're really worried about is Jair Bolsonaro's allegedly fake vaccine card for a vaccine that was basically just a therapeutic, something that happened 2 or 3 years ago. Yeah, it's not political at all. They're just trying to enforce the law. Bowling is next. See you tomorrow.
I built a great company, one of the greatest companies anywhere in the country, especially when it comes to real estate. Have some of the greatest assets in the world. And this is a rigged trial. This was a rigged trial by a crooked judge and a crooked attorney general. And we're fighting it out with them. We have a lot of cash and we have a great company, but they want to take it away, or at least take the cash element away. Billions of dollars in value, billions of dollars in properties. but they'd like to take the cash away so I can't use it on the campaign. And this is just a corrupt group of people. It's election interference, and we'll see how the courts rule on it.
Folks, the left is rejoicing today. New York Judge Arthur Engoron, you know, that model of judicial impartiality who's demanded that Trump pay $454 million for a bond while he appeals Engoron's decision in the New York State fraud case. Let's set aside the fact that I believe this insanely over-the-top judgment is unconstitutional. I mean, the Eighth Amendment to the U.S. Constitution was written specifically to guard against a rogue prosecutor. It reads, and I'm quoting, excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishment inflicted. Eighth Amendment to the Constitution, folks. $450 million for a victimless crime would seem to be excessive. And while we're at it, isn't Trump being exposed to cruel and unusual punishment with all these rogue prosecutors gunning for him? Relentless lawfare. Folks, that's why they stop at Trump. Why would they? They won't stop at Trump. If we allow them to get away with this political warfare, again, no victims, they won't stop at Trump.
They used a consumer fraud statute against a private company in the state of New York. That's how desperate we are. And that's because the rules are different, because you're not entitled to a jury, certain things like that. That was all done by design, Eric, all done intentionally. So they've known what they were doing. They investigated for years and years and years. But all of these cases, just like Georgia, just like everywhere else, we're seeing them brought in an election.
So no victims, and still they fine Trump more money than any individual would be able to come up with, meaning this judgment by definition prohibits Trump, or anyone else for that matter, from their legal right to appeal. That's my non-legal opinion, but I think I'm right. How can Trump or anyone come up with $500 million just to appeal a victimless and excessive judgment? It's lawfare, folks, and you can bet once they take it to Trump, they'll stop at nothing to go after any other political enemy of theirs. We're in a very slippery slope here in the new liberal America. While illegals are ravaging our society, changing the face of our great republic, making it something we never thought we would become, the liberal left is taking out their opponents through the use of the courts, lawfare, largely unelected officials scrubbing conservatism from America. Can you imagine, given what we are seeing now? Can you imagine a day soon where these leftists demand all those illegals they've allowed into America, well, they demand these illegals, these invaders, get a vote? Hell, they're already giving them free housing, free credit cards, driver's licenses. What happens when the socialists demand these built-in Democrat votes? Stay with me here. So they get that vote, there'll be an uproar from the conservative right. But here's where it gets really scary. The loudest voices pushing back on this idea will be subjected to the same treatment Donald Trump is getting right now in the courts. If you speak out against giving illegals a vote, you'll be dragged up to someone's court and put on trial on some trumped-up charges. You think it can't happen? Oh, it most certainly can. You think it won't happen? Well, by then, it'll be too late. 10, 12 million votes for Democrats, and it's over. There'll be no more conservatives in the White House. Full stop. Hell, if I'm right, there'll never be another Republican elected to national office. We'll have to live in the few red states, Florida, right here, Texas, the Southern Stranglehold, Oklahoma, Nebraska, South Dakota, and others. And then we need to pray the Constitution holds up, allowing these states to operate, at least somewhat independently from the new liberal socialist federal government. This isn't some scare tactic. This isn't some bowling made-up conspiracy theory. If someone says so at your weekend barbecue or cocktail gathering, ask them if they ever thought we would allow millions and millions of completely unknown people into America unvetted, or if they had ever heard of anyone being fined $500 million for a victimless action. I can't even call it a crime because I don't think Trump did anything unusual in business, and I certainly don't think he did anything illegal. And finally, ask them if they think if it's okay for Planet Fitness to cancel women's memberships who refuse to be willing to see butt-naked men prancing around butt-naked in the women's locker room, simply because the men want to identify as a woman. The world, and specifically America, is speeding towards a brick wall. This path is unsustainable. And if the left is giddy that they're getting exactly the America they want, Well, be careful. Meanwhile, we conservatives are screaming at the top of our lungs to slam on the brakes. Donald Trump represents America's brake pedal. I pray he stays free and is able to jam the brakes on this terrible direction we're speeding towards. Joe Biden, Barack Obama, AOC, Bernie Sanders, Ilhan Omar, and the rest of the leftists, the socialists, they have planned a new world order for our republic, an unrecognizable future for this great republic. You know, the founding fathers were so smart, so prescient. They saw the future, amazingly. The great Ben Franklin in 1787, when asked, "Excuse me, Dr. Franklin, what have we got, a republic or a monarchy?" Without missing a beat, Franklin summed up America's 2024 existential risk a clear 237 years into his future and said, "Madam Powell, a republic, if you can keep it." A republic, if you can keep it. Wow. For the first time in 237 years, we're legitimately on the verge of no longer being able to keep our great republic. Are you paying attention yet? Are you? Here now to break down some of these crazy things that are going on in lawfare in America is Alan Dershowitz, professor emeritus at Harvard Law School. Professor, you know, $454 million cash, we need it now. Doesn't that in itself prohibit Trump or anyone else's ability to appeal a judgment that you think is undue, unjust?
That was the purpose, to try to get bail so high that he would have to throw in the towel, that James would be able to seize all of his property and become, in addition to being an unconstitutional attorney general who uses her campaigns to try to target people to get Trump, as I wrote in my book. In addition to that, she's now going to become a second-rate landlord, trying to control 40 Wall Street and the Trump Towers. Trump will still have the right to be able to appeal in theory, but she'll have already taken her property, and it will be Alice in Wonderland justice, punishment first, and the trial comes last of all.
Alan,
and the appeal.
The Eighth Amendment to the Constitution, and tell me why this is not, that doesn't apply. Excessive bail shall not be required, nor excessive fines imposed, nor cruel and unusual punishment inflicted. How is that not excessive, and does that by itself throw out his judgment?
I think so, but it's controversial. The Eighth Amendment generally applies to criminal cases, cruel and unusual punishment and excessive bail and criminal. But a fine, if it's imposed by the government, not by a private individual, imposed by a judge, based on a case brought by a state official, the attorney general, the money going to the state, and it's explicitly designed not to compensate, because nobody says that he caused any harm to any bank or anybody else. If it quacks like a duck and it walks like a duck, it's criminal. And I do think the Eighth Amendment should be applied to excessive fines imposed by the state attorney general against this. And I hope his lawyers will make that argument, and I think they might prove successful.
And if the other side says, well, that's usually used in criminal cases, I will note that the Sixth Amendment in all criminal prosecutions, they highlight criminal in the Constitution, the accused shall enjoy the right to a speedy and public trial. So they did carve out criminal for the Sixth Amendment. They never mentioned criminal only in the Eighth, so maybe there's a little bit more of a defense there. Go ahead, you want to weigh in on that?
No, you're absolutely right. The Eighth Amendment, particularly excessive fines, can clearly be seen to be applicable if the state does it for punitive purposes.
All right, let's talk a little bit about control room. Let's get the Nancy Mace soundbite queued up. Trump is now allegedly going to sue ABC and also George Stephanopoulos in large part due to this right here.
It's a shame that you will never feel, George, and I'm not going to sit here on your show and be asked a question meant to shame me about another potential rape victim. I'm not gonna do that.
It's actually not about shaming you. It's a question about Donald Trump.
No, you are shaming me.
You've endorsed Donald Trump for president.
Right.
Donald Trump has been found liable for rape by a jury. Donald Trump has been found liable for defaming the victim of that rape by a jury. It's been affirmed by a judge.
It was not a criminal court case, number one. Number two, I live with shame. And you're asking me a question about my political choices, trying to shame me as a rape victim, and I find it disgusting.
So, Alan, I'm quoting George Stephanopoulos. Donald Trump has been found liable for rape. He's wrong there.
As soon as I saw that, I said, I hope Donald Trump sues him. As soon as I saw that, because he was found not liable for rape. The jury ruled in his favor on the rape charge, and Stephanopoulos obviously made a mistake. The problem is, because Trump's a public figure, he has to prove malice. I have a case against CNN, and CNN said, I said during my speech on the Senate in the question and answer period, CNN accused me of saying a president can do anything, even shoot somebody or et cetera, and not be impeached. Of course, I didn't say that. And the judge in my case found that I didn't say it. I said nothing like it. It was stupid. It was lack of preparation. It was horrible journalism. But he also said I didn't prove malice. Well, it's almost impossible to prove malice when you're a public figure. So Trump may possibly lose. I have advocated changing the malice standard. When you have professional people like Stephanopoulos or like CNN who have the resources to do checking, they ought to be held responsible if they either intend to or engaged in extreme negligence by not checking it out. They didn't do that in my case, and obviously Stephanopoulos didn't do it as well. Trump was vindicated by the jury of the rape charge. Strange verdict. I mean, but they said no rape, but yet sexual assault. But they were very, and Stephanopoulos was wrong, and I don't blame Trump for bringing those charges.
Alan Dershowitz, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Joining us now is criminal defense attorney Mark Garagos. Mark, we're really good to have you on, my friend. So all these lawsuits going on with Trump, we've been talking about, you know, the big Letitia James $454 million judgment. One thing I want to get into, now Trump is fighting back on some of these things. He's fighting back on those. He's also fighting back. He just sued ABC and George Stephanopoulos personally for a back and forth that he had with Nancy Mace. For George Stephanopoulos to define it as a rape, that's a crime. Am I wrong?
Well, and by the way, it was a civil case. She makes a good point. And, you know, you're not going to often politically find me agreeing with her, but she makes an excellent point. Number one, it was not a criminal case. Number two, he wasn't convicted or found liable on the rape. So all of those things are actually accurate points. Now, I know we can try to take it out of context and spin it in several ways, but in my opinion, that doesn't really help the cause of accurate legal analysis. And then you mentioned Tish James. One of the things about Tish James, Eric, that should give people some great pause. I don't fault Tish James at all for going in and zealously trying to basically represent the interest of New York. What I do fault, however, is this idea that somehow you can impose 9-figure judgments without a jury trial. And I don't think that that is constitutional. I think that that is an excessive fine or punishment by definition and a violation of the Eighth Amendment.
Eighth Amendment, that was in my monologue just earlier, exactly that. Excessive fines, it's a victimless crime. It's a victimless, I won't even call it a crime, event. People, the insurance companies made money, Trump made money, the banks made money.
The banks made money.
Doesn't this, in fact, show that there's a way to eliminate your right to appeal a judgment by just slapping on a judgment that you can't post the bond for, therefore you have to accept the judgment? Am I wrong?
Well, no, you're not wrong, and this is one of the problems with how this has unfolded. Number one, he was not given the right to a jury trial in this particular instance. Now, that is an unsettled area of the law, so that should, first of all, be tested. Second of all, to then impose this kind of off-the-charts penalty and then say you now, in order to test this uncharted territory, you need to liquidate your assets in order to post a bond, in order to say, hey, wait a second here, not only does this potentially violate the Eighth Amendment, it's actually a twofer. You have a right to a trial by jury under the Sixth Amendment as well. So you have two of the core amendments that are violative, arguably, in one proceeding, and it really should send a shiver or a pause through anyone who actually has to either prosecute or defend these cases. It just, You know, I don't know if you've had him on. Have you talked with Kevin O'Leary from Shark Tank about this?
I have not. And I just have an issue with Kevin O'Leary walking around saying he wants to buy TikTok. You and I both know there's no chance Kevin O'Leary can afford to buy TikTok. But anyway.
But if you listen to Kevin O'Leary, he will talk about the effects that this has on people who want to do business in New York State.
Of course.
He makes a very compelling argument.
Yeah, they'll lose more money. They'll lose more money in tax revenue by businesses saying, "I'm not going to go to New York if you can arbitrarily slap a $500 million judgment on a victimless event happening with a business you don't agree with." Mark, I got to go. I appreciate your time, and we'll get you back again real soon. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, folks, coming up, it took the Supreme Court 24 hours to figure out the law, but it seems they finally got one right by overturning their ban on Texas SB 4 immigration law. The man who led the charge, who beat the United States government at the Supreme Court level, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton, is next.
Good evening, I'm Mike Carter. Now an update on tonight's primary races across the country. Newsmax can project that Donald Trump has won the GOP primary in the state of Illinois. The former president is also the projected winner tonight in the state of Ohio. And Newsmax can project that Donald Trump is also the winner tonight in his home state of Florida. And that's exactly where we find our senior correspondent, John Huddy, who's live for us tonight in Boca Raton. John, looks like another good night for 45.
Yeah, it is. I mean, unsurprisingly, we knew that he was going to, basically cruise to victory here in Florida. He also, by the way, after, casting his ballot, he came out, made some remarks to the media. Melania Trump, former First Lady, was by his side, and one of the reporters asked if she planned to appear by her husband's side on the campaign trail. She said, well, stay tuned. That said, we are following some of the other down ballot, as they're called, races. In the contentious Ohio GOP Senate primary race, State Senator Matt Dolan, and I'm just kind of checking the numbers as we go along, is ahead of businessman Bernie Moreno, who, as you know, received former President Trump's endorsement over the weekend. Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose is still in behind. In third place. He's picked up a little more steam. He's picked up some more percentage points, but he's still trailing Dolan and Moreno. The winner of that race will face Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown in a race that could help determine control of the U.S. Senate. We're also watching the 12th congressional district race in Illinois between Representative Mike Bost up against State Senator Darren Bailey. Also in Illinois, we're following the 4th congressional district race where Democratic Chicago Alderman Raymond Lopez, who has been very critical of the Biden administration's handling of the border and ongoing border crisis. He's been one of the most outspoken Democrats about that, is facing incumbent Democrat Representative Jesus Chuy Garcia. It's too early to tell how that race is going to play out. But again, as I said, stay tuned. We're keeping
All right, senior correspondent John Huddy. We'll check back with you throughout the night. Stick around on Newsmax for continuing coverage of tonight's primary election. I'm Mike Carter.
Big win, folks. The Supreme Court just hours ago reversed the decision that they made just yesterday to extend a ban on Texas's SB 4 immigration law. Instead, the court will now let officers actually do their jobs and arrest people who illegally come across the border. I'm not going to sit here and applaud the Supreme Court because today someone woke up and decided to let law enforcement enforce the law. With that said, this is a huge win for Texas, a huge win for America, and Attorney General Ken Paxton, who led the charge to, no surprise, the court's 3 liberal justices, Sotomayor, Kagan, and Ketanji Brown Jackson, all dissented, showing yet again that American interests are not their main concern. Join me now, Texas Attorney General Ken Paxton. Attorney General, really, really a huge congratulations. We've been pounding the table. What a great job Texas has been doing. If the feds would just let you do your job, now they're going to be forced to let you do your job via the Supreme Court. Let me ask you this. First question. Are you going to start arresting illegals today?
That is not up to me. That is up to the governor and law enforcement. So he makes the call on that. My job is to go into court and defend what laws were passed. And I'm certainly happy to do that and grateful that we got a win and the opportunity to stop illegal immigration in our state and then negative consequences associated with that, which are many, as you know.
AG, tell us what your response was when the initial finding was that you couldn't do your job, secure your own border, and arrest people coming across. Head must have been spinning at least, and how do you feel now 24 hours later?
Well, look, I knew it was wrong because there's no way that Texas or any other state joins the union if the federal government promises to defend you and then decides they're not going to, and then tells you, oh, by the way, we've decided not to defend you and you can't defend yourself. It's against the law. There's no way that any state joins the union. So I know that it cannot be right that our founders set us up for that type of failure. We have to be able to defend ourselves. That the federal government's not only not going to defend us, they're actually going to aid and abet the cartels and other people coming into this country, whether they're terrorists or not terrorists. You can't expect us to not defend ourselves when the federal government's helping the other side.
Agreed. And, this could be the blueprint. You think it should be and could be the blueprint for other states. I live here in Florida, and Governor Ron DeSantis has been doing a great job doing what he can. But is this the blueprint for, even the Haitians coming across the border, arresting on the state level? And by the way, what do you do with them once you arrest them?
So they're held in jail, and then a judge, it's their responsibility to send them back to the country that they came from. So in other words, if they came across the border from Mexico, we send them back to Mexico. Wherever they came from, they go back to. So it's up to our judiciary, our state judges, to actually send them back.
Now, is there a risk that the individual judges might not?
Look, it's the way the law was set up. So we arrest them, judges have to send them back. So I would hope that our judges in Texas are smart enough, because they're elected, and if they start keeping people here illegally, they will be accountable to the voters. We're not the federal judiciary here where you get to stay forever. These judges will be unelected if they do not enforce Texas law.
Again, Attorney General Ken Paxton of Texas just beat the United States government in court. The Supreme Court concurred with Ken Paxton and the state of Texas. My question, Attorney General of Texas, if Trump wins, he's going to need his own Attorney General of the United States. A lot of people right now are speaking your name as a potential candidate for Attorney General of the United States. Something you'd be interested in doing?
Look, I've never talked to Trump about this. I'm open to helping him in any way I can. We'll have to see when we get there. Of course, he's got a lot to go through, and we need him as our next president. I'm going to do everything I can to make sure that he wins Texas and any other state that we can help with. And in the end, it's his call on what he needs is his next United States Attorney General. But certainly, we know we're going to do better than Merrick Garland, who's selling us out.
Attorney General, before we let you go, I know you're a busy man, and a lot of people want to talk to you today on this huge win at the Supreme Court level today. But what was your argument? What was your platform? When you presented to the Supreme Court, what did you say that got this win?
Well, so I had my Solicitor General argued the case, and our argument's pretty simple. We have a right as a sovereign state to protect ourselves from harm. And if the federal government is not going to enforce its own laws, they can't thus then prevent us from protecting our citizens from all the detriments of illegal immigration, which include all kinds of crimes and potential risks to our state.
Final thought. There was some, at one point, you guys, the state of Texas and Governor Abbott had put up some razor wire, and it actually was working. It was keeping the illegals from going into Texas in a very vulnerable spot. The feds seem to want to pull that down. Where does that stand, sir?
So we're still in litigation over that. There's no injunction protecting us right now. But since that case, since we lost the injunction from the Supreme Court, there has been no razor wire cut down or any fences cut down by Border Patrol or any other federal agency. And we have continued to put more up.
All right, we're going to leave it right there. Attorney General of Texas, Ken Paxton, thank you for joining us on a big win today at the Supreme Court. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Have a great evening.
You too. All right, coming up, folks, Biden has fueled one of the worst fires this nation has ever seen by leaving our borders open and unprotected. Our country is overrun by illegals, and their children are exploited the second they get here. We'll expose this moral disaster next on The Balance. The left's illegal migrant crisis is not just an invasion at our border. It's more than a humanitarian crisis. It's a complete and utter moral disaster. Now, when I say this, it's entirely different than how the left means it. They believe it's our moral duty to take care and take the burden of the failed states around the world and take care of their people. They believe America should take in all the sick and the poor. Just listen to Joe Biden inviting a surge of illegals at the border back in 2019 during the Democratic debates.
I would, in fact, make sure that we immediately surge to the border. All those people are seeking asylum. They deserve to be heard. That's who we are. We're a nation that says if you want to flee and you're fleeing oppression, you should come.
Joe Biden and his open border Democrats are responsible for what's going on right now. So it's no surprise that illegals are flooding our southern border. The Democrats intentionally created this problem, and I'll explain why. The New York Times finally did some real journalism and published this shocking piece on how children of illegals are selling candy instead of going to school and how New York State is doing nothing to stop them. Bravo to the New York Times and Andy Newman for shedding some light on a huge problem. Now, many of you aren't New Yorkers. We have viewers all across the country. But if you happen to live in one of the 5 boroughs of New York City, it's a common sight to see children of all ages, sometimes with parents, but many times alone, selling candy and goods to commuters in the subway system. It's actually a bit of an open secret. It's so frequent, people don't really notice or talk about it. But we will, because this is completely unacceptable. Almost 200,000 illegals have been processed just by New York City agencies in the last 2 years. And because many of them are low-skilled and don't know the language, they become desperate and have to do just about anything to survive in one of the world's most dangerous and expensive cities. And yes, they even go so far as dispatching their own children to sell whatever they can to make a buck. As Newman states in his piece, when he reached out to 7 city and state agencies asking whose job it is to do something about this problem, they all said, not mine. In other words, not my problem. Not at all surprising. And what's interesting, the Department of Education actually has what they call attendance teachers who work to make sure families are sending their children to school. But here's the problem. They never go out on patrol to follow up or enforce these requirements. And when they were contacted about this problem, they said, I think I'll refer you to the NYPD on this. And guess what? The NYPD declined to answer if there was a protocol in place for any of this. Then there's the city's child welfare agencies on record saying children selling merchandise or panhandling is not considered to be maltreatment or neglect. But let's be realistic about this. By the time you call a hotline or the police, the kid has already jumped on another train and moved on. Folks, children between the ages of 7 and 17 are required to be in a classroom learning. But here's how the so-called compassion harms the very people they're trying to protect. In the article, Newman talks about one candy seller, a 9-year-old girl who was not in school. And guess why? She never got vaccinated. So they wouldn't let her into the classroom. This is unbelievable. This is what the left's migrant crisis has brought to America. This isn't charity. This isn't compassion. The left is facilitating a system that's taking advantage of children, violating child labor laws, and the government's answer is, not my problem. But here's the thing. They expect you to pick up the tab. They expect you to buy the candies from the children on the trains. Do the elites take public transportation? Of course not. But you do. You have to watch this. They expect you to house them, to give them money as they beg. This is awful. What they've done is on purpose. It's all by design. It's meant to pull at your heartstrings. It's meant to break you, because the left and the open border globalists will say, well, you can't deport them now. That would just be cruel. So just let them stay. And at the end of the day, the people who created this problem in the first place try to act like heroes for letting these people stay. This is how the left plays politics. And you know what, folks? While the left is importing child labor into the states through the border, they're also finding replacements for adults, American adults. Tyson Foods just recently closed a facility in Perry, Iowa, a town with about 8,000 people. And they're laying off over 1,000 American workers. But guess what else they're doing? Partnering with a nonprofit refugee group to hire up to 42,000 illegals. Now, there's a complicated process. how the refugees can obtain work permits. And as their claim is reviewed, they're allowed to work. So, of course, Tyson denies this. They say we didn't fire Americans to hire illegals, but the American people see right through that. All of this are dark agencies, the dark consequences of the left's border crisis. And the child labor exploitation is a quiet side effect that no one wants to talk about. Yes, this is an invasion of epic proportions. Yes, this is an attack on American sovereignty, but sadly, it's a moral catastrophe. And what makes it worse is that, if at all possible, it's being weaponized by the left to achieve a political end. And they should be ashamed of themselves for that. Coming up, retired General Mark Humiliation Milley testified today about one of Biden's lowest moments, the botched Afghanistan withdrawal. We'll break it all down next on The Balance.
Good evening, I'm Mike Carter. Polls have closed this at the top of this hour in Illinois, where Donald Trump and Joe Biden are projected winners in their respective primaries. Both Trump and Biden also winning their party's primaries in Ohio tonight, and in Donald Trump's home state of Florida, where the former president voted today. Trump will win the Sunshine State. Ron DeSantis, meanwhile, look at that, just getting 4% of the vote. For more from the campaign trail, let's check back with our senior correspondent, John Huddy, in Palm Beach, Florida tonight, Boca Raton, Florida tonight. John, we also have a tight race in tonight's GOP Senate primary race in Ohio, where I believe we might have a winner announced. This could have national implications on the U.S. Senate.
Well, yeah, Mike, it could help determine the makeup and certainly control of the U.S. Senate come November. But let's take a look at that race, the Senate race, as you were just talking about in Ohio, where Bernie Moreno, who's Trump-backed, he received former President Trump's endorsement over the weekend. He's a businessman. He owns some car dealerships here in Florida. Right now, he's at 42% over Matt Dolan, state senator whose family owns the Cleveland Guardians, and then Ohio Secretary of State Frank LaRose there trailing in third place with 22% of the vote. So, we were waiting to see if Trump's endorsement, Moreno was kind of a weak candidate until this past weekend when he really shot to the forefront there, and the polls leading up to tonight really had him and Dolan very, very close. The winner of that race will face Democratic Senator Sherrod Brown, again, in a race that could help determine control of the U.S. Senate. We're also watching the 12th Congressional District race in Illinois between Representative Mike Bost, who's up against State Senator Darren Bailey. Bost has Trump's endorsement. Bailey was endorsed by former President Trump back in 2022 during the gubernatorial race, while Bost is well ahead with 65% of the vote. In Illinois, we've been following also the congressional district race where Democratic Chicago Alderman Ray Lopez, very critical of the Biden administration's handling of the border crisis, is facing incumbent Democratic Representative Chuy Garcia. Well, at this point, Lopez is far behind. And real quick, in Kansas, Joe Biden coming in second place right now behind Joe Biden. None of these candidates. Mike, back to you.
All right. Thank you for that, John Huddy. We'll be right back.
Fired and disgraced General Mark Humiliation Milley testified on Capitol Hill today regarding the completely botched U.S. withdrawal from Afghanistan in 2021, a withdrawal that took the lives of 13 U.S. soldiers. Early in the hearing, General Milley did admit it was a terribly mismanaged plan, but also reveals he doesn't even know how many Americans were left behind.
But how many Americans were left behind? How many of our allies? And what has happened to them? Have they been beaten, killed, tortured?
I don't know the exact number of Americans that were left behind because the starting number was never clear.
Join me now, California Congressman Darrell Issa and Marine Sergeant Nicole Gee's mother-in-law, Christy Shamblin. Christy, I'm going to start with you. Congressman, I'll get to you in a second on the hearing, but first of all, our condolences to the loss of your family member, Christy. Tell us when you hear this, how botched the top generals. That guy was the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the chairman of the most powerful military in the world. What does it tell you when you hear that and you lost a loved one?
It's very upsetting and disheartening. I feel like there's a lot of answers that we haven't got yet that we're still looking for, and a positive path forward so we make sure this doesn't happen again is really what we're hoping for here, and we haven't gotten any answers to help us get there.
Yeah, I'm going to come back to you in a second. Congressman Darrell Issa, did you hear anything that gave you confidence in this president, this administration, and the leaders of this military that would tell you that it won't happen again?
We certainly heard nothing to give us confidence in the administration that decided over what appears to be the at least initial objections of the military to pull all the military out. General Milley specifically said if he had to do it, if he was given the authority, State Department and American personnel would be pulled out, basically honor before the military, which means the withdrawal would have been while Bagram was still an air base, while we still had capability to defend not just there but around. And in fact, those 13 young faces you see would still be alive if that had been heeded.
Christy Shamblin, Sergeant Nicole, we saw a picture there on the upper left-hand side of that picture. Where was she when the bomb exploded?
She was right on the barrier gate. She was out in the crowd rescuing vulnerable women and children. She was very proud of the work she was doing, and she was enthusiastic about it.
And in the aftermath, have you learned anything new? You know, there was rumors that the State Department had known that there was a suicide bomb threat and failed to alert the 13 members U.S. military who died that day. Have you learned anything further along those lines?
We haven't learned anything new along those lines. Today, we did ask specific questions from Mr. Milley about those things, and he didn't have the answers, you know, that would help us move forward.
Congressman Darrell Issa, Christy Shamblin, thank you both for joining us today. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
All right, folks, coming up, if athletes can't gamble on the games they play in, then why are members of Congress allowed to trade the companies that they regulate? I'm diving into the suspicious level of success that our elected officials had trading in 2023. Can't believe the amounts of money they made. Next. Something we've been talking about, but has flown pretty much under the radar by the mainstream media. A ton of elected officials made an absolute fortune in the stock market again last year. In terms of overall returns, Democrats, led by Brian Higgins, absolutely crushed it. Just look at some of these numbers. Higgins, almost 240%. Blumenthal, nearly 70%. Pelosi, 66.5%, which is actually probably a little low because we don't know what Paul Pelosi's making. Republicans also had their fair share of fun. Congressman Mark Green saw 122% return. Two of his colleagues, Garrett Graves and David Rouser, topped 100%. Did your investments do that well that last year? I know mine didn't, folks. This isn't one or two lucky people. Dozens of elected officials not only did well, but actually outperformed the stock market by a massive amount during an absolute roller coaster of a year. It doesn't take a genius to see what's going on here, but if you're anything like me, this raises some questions. Join me now to make sense of it all, the host of the Trish Regan Show, Trish Regan herself, my former colleague at CNBC and Fox News. Trish, we've been talking about this a long time. You know, I watched it the other day. I just have to relate the story. I saw NVIDIA explode one day at great earnings, and someone said, well, Paul Pelosi, Nancy Pelosi made a ton of money, millions of dollars in NVIDIA. The very next day, Palo Alto was crashing. It was down 100 points, this stock, Palo Alto, and then jumped 60 points. I called my broker, and he said, Pelosi bought calls on Palo Alto today, and it ran the stock up. They make gazillions of dollars, Trish. It's so unfair to us all.
It's outrageous. I mean, really, it's unacceptable in every way, shape, and form. You're right. We have talked about it for years, and yet here we are. Imagine that. And we're still talking about it. And you want to know why we're still talking about it? Because these people are there to make laws, and they don't care one bit. In fact, they're so incentivized not to make laws that would actually govern themselves. So, of course, you know, you're an investment banker. You can't be trading in and out of stocks all day long. You're a journalist. Most journalist organizations don't want you trading in and out of stocks all day long. Eric, it just so happens that if you're a member of Congress, guess what? You can sit on a committee. You can get all kinds of inside information about a particular sector, maybe even a particular company, and you can go and trade that thing all you want because they don't bother to govern themselves.
I'll give you a good example. It's the chip. It's the chip industry, NVIDIA and others. Biden's going to go to Arizona this week and hand over $11 billion to some chip makers. there are people who knew about this a long time ago who could buy in front of that. So if you're handing out billions in cash, of course the company's bottom lines are going to do better. We can't do it. We don't hear the information. If we did, we'd go to jail.
Well, I mean, look at SVB as well, right? The financial space. That was another one where you saw some people selling SVB. Interesting timing before the whole thing went down. I mean, there's a lot of examples of this, and I think it's pretty outrageous. Look, there are things that we can do. We should be as educated as we possibly can as individuals. We should follow these spaces. You should have the right kind of research. It's actually one of the reasons why I started 76 Research, a little plug for that, 76research.com, so that you get more information. Because here's the deal. The institutions are lying to you, whether it be, you know, hey, like we both worked in financial news, and you know that CNBC is not going to necessarily put a bear on when you've got a bullish market. Like it's just not on the ratings curve, so to speak. So there's a lot of that goes on. But I think the most egregious thing of all is the fact that the people that are there making the laws to theoretically protect us, right? I mean, think about all the stuff that goes into the SEC requirements, et cetera. If you're actually on the banking side, on the trading side, you got to be very careful. And yet these guys in Congress, there's no regulation.
No
it's
risk.
Absolutely outrageous.
Yep, we got to leave it right there. Trish Regan, always good to have you on. We'll get you back again soon. Congratulations on your research group. All right, folks, coming up, I'll look ahead, much more balance after this. That's all the time we have. Greg Kelly Reports is up next. Have a great night, but keep it here on Newsmax as election results continue to pour in. And never forget, keep the balance.
We'll stop it right there. I love those moments. I love Lee Greenwood, President Trump. It's awesome, every rally. But the words, I was listening to this song a couple of rallies ago, and it hit me. I'm proud to be an American, where at least I know I'm free. Where at least I know I'm free. Do we know that anymore? Are we in a free country? Does it feel like a free country? I don't know that it does. Was it a free country for that man in Loudoun County who had the temerity to show up at a school board meeting and stick up for his daughter who was assaulted in the girls' room by a transgender boy? Not a free country. How about the coach for the Raiders? Remember this guy, Gruden? Okay, there was a word. It rhymed with bag. It started with an F. Unfortunately, it was used to describe gay people a lot. We don't use it anymore. He used it in an email, a private email, 10 years ago. They found it. He got fired. Is that, folks, is that freedom or is that fear? Fear from the totalitarian state it seems like we live in? Black Lives Matter. Do you agree with it? Do you possibly have some misgivings with it? All right, maybe something needs to be done about civil rights. Maybe we can have a conversation. This is not right, okay? And maybe in the middle of the hoopla, you decided to say something like, well, Black Lives Matter, but all lives matter too. Check out what happened to the guy who said that. A man who was a sportscaster for the Sacramento Kings. He lost his job after he tweeted, all lives matter. How do you feel about gay pride? Quite frankly, one's sexuality, I thought it was kind of irrelevant, right? I mean, aren't we past this? But it seems to define everything. If you're not on board with that, are we in a free country? Are we defined by our appetites? Let's take a look at this. This young child, is this child free? Is this freedom? I don't think so. And you know, it's not just about that child. This all has a chilling effect. You may not be a coach for the Raiders, whatever, but it has a chilling effect. Oh my gosh, if I make a mistake, what's going to happen? That's not freedom. Try wearing a MAGA hat in the wrong neighborhood. Or in the wrong city, a blue city. What happens to somebody if they're wearing a Make America Great Again hat? Do me a favor, don't try it in a blue city. It may not end well. We're not free. How about this plan to hire how many new IRS agents? 87,000? Is that the hallmark of a free society? Let's go back to the inauguration of Joe Biden. He was very proud that day. It was creepy and weird. Basically, nobody was allowed to show up. Not that there were throngs of people who were interested, but, you know, after January 6th, the idea of peaceably assembling, they have so stigmatized it. Oh, it could turn into something horrible. Stay home. Don't peaceably assemble. How about this one? James Madison High School, right here in New York City. Been around for over 100 years. You know what they did this year in January? They sent the students home and they invited illegal immigrants to come in. Illegal aliens came in and took over the school, and it was the city's plan. New York City, this was their shelter plan for these people. Interesting that the powerful already got all they needed from that school. For instance, take a look at some of the people who went to that high school. Senator Schumer, Senator Sanders, Judge Judy, Ruth Bader Ginsburg. Well, do you think that their parents ever would have allowed those precious students, Chucky Schumer, to be kicked out of school for some illegal migrant? Of course not. It doesn't work that way. But somehow today it does. And look at the so-called elected leaders. Who are they representing when they take a knee for who the hell knows what? You should talk to Vernon Jones sometime about those kente cloths they're wearing. They have absolutely no clue what they're doing, who they're kneeling to, why they're kneeling, but they're going along with it, and they represent millions and millions of people. Here's a rule of thumb when it comes to kneeling in a truly free society.
We stand tall, we stand proud, and we only kneel to Almighty God.
That's more like it. Hey, if you want to kneel, kneel. But elected leaders taking a knee for something they have no clue just to appease the woke left that they're terrified of, is this a free society? If it can happen to him, it can happen to us. Take a look at this fine. What is it up to? $455 million. You know, I can't officially endorse anybody, but I'd kind of like to vote for him. Maybe he's making it so he can't make it to Election Day, right? They're trying to throw him in jail. And maybe taking his money is all a part of a plan so he can't campaign for office. I never thought of it this way. Donald Trump, just a few hours ago.
We have a lot of cash and we have a great company, but they want to take it away, or at least take the cash element away. Billions of dollars in value, billions of dollars in properties, but they'd like to take the cash away so I can't use it on the campaign.
Isn't that interesting? Never crossed my mind. It's not a free society right now. At least I know I'm free. I don't know that anymore. Donald Trump, one of the greatest leaders this country has seen in centuries. I know not everybody agrees with me, but at least give him a shot. You're trying to lock him up. This is not a free society, and there are not enough people. People, whether it's ordinary people or people in positions of power, doing the right thing here. Kevin O'Leary, the guy from Shark Tank, you never know where you're going to find your heroes. He has no real affinity for Donald Trump. Maybe he does, maybe he doesn't. He says Donald Trump is beside the point, actually. When you start throwing around fines like this, his comments today were so important. We have laws. We have property rights. It attracts foreign capital from all around the world. All of that is being shaken to the core here. This is case setting against the American brand. This is an attack on America. The whole world is watching and everybody is waiting for one thing we haven't got yet: adult supervision. Where is it? We need an adult in the room. This is the United States of America under siege. An adult in the room. By that, what I think he means is, you know, somebody who doesn't necessarily agree with Trump, or maybe he did, whatever, but just go for it. We all know that this is wrong. More people should be standing up and saying so. And as a conservative, I've done that before myself for people I don't like. For instance, Eric Adams, the liberal mayor of New York City. There's a lot of reasons why I can't stand this guy and I think he should be driven from office. But there's been a new allegation that he sexually assaulted a colleague back in 1993 or harassed. It's very unclear. Of course it's unclear. It happened in 1993. It's impossible to defend himself in that kind of case. It's a civil case, a lawsuit. He's being sued because he got famous. And nobody on the left is sticking up for this guy. I will. This is wrong. Andrew Cuomo, a million reasons to not like Andrew Cuomo. But he was targeted by Letitia James, accused of sexually harassing 13 women and driven from office. You could have driven him from office for a million reasons, the nursing homes, whatever, that crazy book deal. But he's no sexual predator. We have to be principled people. This is I got a lot of heat for this, but you have to stick up for the principle. Take a look at this. The New York Times noted that among the only public figures inclined to defend Mr. Cuomo publicly are conservatives, like the former mayor, Rudolph Giuliani, the Newsmax host, Greg Kelly, and John Catsimatidis, the colorful supermarket magnate. Liberals were quiet. Liberals are quiet today for Eric Adams. Principles are important because sooner or later they're going to come for your friends, and they're coming for our friends right now. John Eastman, what's his mistake? He represented the President of the United States. He had some interesting ideas, charged with crimes. Rudy Giuliani, charged with crimes, fined $150 million, and they suspended his law license. This is not a free country. This is a message. It's not just to these guys. It's to anybody else who's even thinking of getting out of line with the establishment. Don't do it, or we're coming for you. Rudy Giuliani is still a giant in law. He has not lost one step, and there are people who know it. He's been a hero for decades, but right now he's at the top of his game. But a reminder, we never had a prosecutor like him.
Mafia leaders were rounded up in an overnight sweep, and today, U.S. Attorney Rudolph Giuliani announced the indictments.
This is a great day for law enforcement, but this is a bad day, probably the worst, for the Mafia.
I felt terrible. I knew Fat Tony. I liked him a lot. And tonight, a man identified as Ralph Scopro. Ralphie Scopro, knew Ralphie well. You know, I grew up with him.
This case charges more Mafia bosses in one indictment than any ever before.
Rudy, a legend, and he is still a great lawyer. You know, there were a lot of young assistant U.S. attorneys who are still bragging about their days as a prosecutor. Here's Rudy back then. That's Michael Chertoff in the middle with the mustache, a guy named Gil Childers on the right, and John Savarese on the left. He took his stint at the U.S. Attorney's Office, and now he's making millions of dollars as a law partner. Hey, it's a free country, but I don't know. I want to see more lawyers who know better to step forward and do the right thing. These guys, they just go wherever the wind is blowing because I guess it's good for business, right? Here's John Savarese, fast forward, 35 years or so, and he's as woke and wrong as they come.
We are living through a moment in our country's history in which the values that have long animated our nation and that have earned our nation respect around the world are in grave peril. The current administration loudly proclaims, quote, "Our country is full," and that accordingly our country's borders should be closed to those hoping for a better life.
2019, when the border was, under control. We had legal immigration. It's interesting. He talks about the Trump era like it was upside down. Now we know what upside down is. And what's upside down is what's happening to Donald Trump. And he knows it, and they all know it, but they hate Trump so much that this is okay. It's not okay. Someday it's going to happen to somebody he likes, somebody you like, and somebody we like right now, Donald Trump.
Kevin O'Leary, that last line, please. We need an adult in the room. This is the United States of America under siege. And let's name a few more names. And I say this respectfully because there are a lot of people in life who just don't want the headache. They've worked hard. They went to the right schools. The establishment wasn't as dysfunctional and weird as it is today. So this is a respectful wake-up. A request. Tom Daschle, you were in the United States Senate. Somebody told me recently that you're a common-sense guy and not a bad guy. Do you think this is right, what's happening to Donald Trump? How about you, Ted Olson, veteran of the Reagan administration? I'm told that you're really smart and ethical. Paul Clement, another top lawyer. Rod Rosenstein, you were there every step of the way. You know about the corruption of the FBI. Alberto Gonzalez and Michael Mukasey, superstar attorney general. These gentlemen can do so much. We need adults in the room. It can't just be a handful of cable hosts and Alan Dershowitz, okay? We need help. This country needs help. And by the way, thank you, Jeb Bush. Jeb Bush did it. Jeb Bush wrote an op-ed about the injustice that's happening to Donald Trump. Jeb Bush and the Bushes we know don't like Donald Trump. But it seems like Jeb Bush likes America more, loves America more than he hates Donald Trump. And that is a beautiful, patriotic thing. Governor Bush, thank you. Thank you so much, really. Means a lot. Back to Lee Greenwood for a moment. The second part of that opening verse, what does it say there? I'm proud to, and I won't forget the men who died, who gave that right to me. You know what's happening? The men who died, their traditions that they thought were being handed down, they're being thrown out. Who's heard of duty, honor, country? General MacArthur, etched in the walls of West Point, the motto of West Point, even the Army, I think. You know, they've thrown it out. It doesn't work anymore. They don't want anybody thinking about duty, honor, country. They're coming up with new, weird terms. Woke. Woke is the way, isn't it? And who's to blame? Who is to blame? Well, a lot of people, a lot of forces, but most of all, the generals, past and current. Hopefully not future. More on these guys when I come back.
Good evening, I'm Mike Carter. Some polls have now closed in the presidential primary races in Arizona, where we'll head in a minute. But first to Illinois, where Donald Trump and Joe Biden are the projected winners in their respective primary races. To Ohio now, where Newsmax has called both the Republican and Democrat presidential primaries for both former President Trump and President Biden. Staying in Ohio now, Trump-backed Senate candidate Bernie Moreno is the winner tonight in the much-anticipated Ohio Republican primary. And keep in mind, the winner of Ohio's Senate seat in November very well could shift the balance of power in the U.S. Senate. And in Donald Trump's home state of Florida tonight, where the former president did vote earlier today, Newsmax projects Trump will win the Sunshine State. And take a look. The governor of that state, Ron DeSantis, getting just 4% of the vote. Let's head out to Arizona now, where correspondent John Glasgow is standing by at Kari Lake's GOP presidential primary watch party tonight. John, what's the atmosphere like in Phoenix tonight?
Oh, Mike, it is rocking in here. We got the band on the stage. Kari Lake is going to be here shortly. And we have a lot of Trump supporters in the house. A lot of people here supporting Kari Lake as well. I've got Nancy Jameson. She was ready to get out here and support the Republican Party, Kari Lake. You've got your sign here, also big Trump supporter. What are the most important issues for you going into November, the general election?
Oh, absolutely the border. That's huge here in Arizona. A huge issue. For our safety, we're concerned about it here.
And what's you're obviously Trump supporter. You want him to go. What's going to make the deciding factor here, do you feel, going into general? Are you seeing that shift here change? Because President Biden won this in 2020. Can you see that this is going to change? Is this going to flip this state?
I think it has to change. We've got to see Trump win this time around because our economy is going flat. I don't think we're going to have another election if we don't win this election this time. I think our whole, what we know as America is going to shift, and I don't think we're going to have what I grew up with.
Right. Very well said. Thank you so much, Nancy. Mike, we'll send it back to you in the studio. We'll have more coverage here from Phoenix coming up later in the show.
All right, thank you for that, John. We'll be tracking those results from Arizona as they come in, as well as a special election tonight in California. Stay with Newsmax.
My analysis, based on my assessment and the recommendations of the commanders, to include General McKenzie, and the consensus of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, was that we needed to maintain a minimum force of 2,500 troops on the ground, mostly special forces, with allied troops and contractors, in order to sustain the Afghan National Security Forces and its government until the diplomatic conditions of the Doha Agreement were met. Without this support, it was my view at the time that it was only a matter of when, not if, the Afghan government would collapse and the Taliban would take control.
Was he really that clear and direct with President Biden? I doubt it. These guys, these generals, they play all kinds of bureaucrat games. Here he is, ex-General Milley on Capitol Hill today. Joe Biden does say that what he said didn't happen. But then again, it's Joe Biden, so who the hell knows?
Your top military advisors warned against withdrawing on this timeline. They wanted you to keep about 2,500 troops.
No, they didn't. It was split. That wasn't true. That wasn't true.
They didn't tell you that they wanted troops to stay?
No, not in terms of whether we were going to get out in a time frame, all troops. They didn't argue against that.
So no one told, your military advisors did not tell you, no, we should just keep 2,500 troops. It's been a stable situation for the last several years. We can do that. We can continue to do that.
No, no one said that to me that I can recall.
All I know is that Joe Biden and Mark Milley have zero credibility, and we lost in Afghanistan in large part thanks to their incompetence and mismanagement. Part of the incompetence was Mark Milley's obsession with his own public image. He was always granting interviews. He was always talking to reporters. He was obsessed with it. And he told The Atlantic, he was also bad-mouthing Trump. And here was an attempt recently to badmouth Trump, but I know the truth. He told The Atlantic the following. Take a look at this soldier, by the way. A real hero. He was wounded, the captain there, and here he is with his wife. He's severely wounded. He looks great, but, well, let's go to the story that Milley told The Atlantic. It goes like this. At his welcome ceremony at Joint Base Meier-Henderson Hall, Milley gained an early and disturbing insight into Trump's attitude toward soldiers. Milley had chosen a severely wounded Army Captain, Luis Avila, to sing God Bless America. Great. Avila, who had completed 5 combat tours, had lost a leg in an IED attack in Afghanistan, had suffered 2 heart attacks, 2 strokes, and brain damage as a result of his injuries. Now, after Avila's performance, Trump walked over to congratulate him, but then said to Milley, within earshot of several witnesses, "Why do you bring people like that here? No one wants to see that, the wounded." Never let Avila appear in public again, Trump told Milley. Recently, Milley invited Avila to sing at his retirement ceremony. Okay, so this is a story, according to Mark Milley, tries to make Trump look bad. Let's watch what really happened.
Captain Luis Avila, a U.S. soldier severely wounded by an IED explosion December 2011 in Afghanistan, uses music therapy as a critical component to his healing. Captain Avila will now join the Joint Service Quartet in singing God Bless America.
God bless America, land that I love. Stand beside her and guide her to the light with the light of her bone. For the wrong.
So it's tough, right? Watch how it ends, though. I counted 5 hugs. That's the truth. That's the truth, and it's beautiful. Mark Milley, shame on you. We'll be right back. Hey, that's Peter Navarro, senior advisor to President Trump, just before he checks into federal prison. Yep, going to jail for, I guess, defying a congressional subpoena. Can you go to jail for that? Apparently no one's gone to jail for that in centuries or so. It seems incredible. Hunter Biden was subpoenaed, or at least invited to show up to speak to Congress tomorrow to be questioned, and he's not showing up. Is he ever going to find himself in the kind of trouble that Peter Navarro is in? At least regarding showing up, probably not. Congressman Jim Jordan, our favorite Republican from Ohio. Congressman Jordan, welcome back. How are
Good to be
you?
with you, Greg. I'm fine, thanks.
Poor Peter Navarro, right? Totally unfair.
No, it once again just shows the double standard. I mean, we found out last week from Robert Hur that Joe Biden can keep and disclose classified information. He can do so in Special Counsel Hur's language because he had strong motivations to ignore the rules around classified documents because he was writing a book for which he got paid $8 million. So he can do all that. But because he's a forgetful old man, we're not going to charge him. Meanwhile, Peter Navarro, as you pointed out, the only guy who's ever charged and a White House staffer for contempt of Congress, only guy to be charged and actually now go, he's got a 4-month prison term, not to mention what they've done to President Trump. So this, again, just another example of the double standard.
Can we take a look at Tony Bobolinsky? I think the guy's a hero. This is when a lot of us first saw him, actually, and his pretty amazing story. Let's take a look.
I was introduced to Joe Biden by Jim Biden and Hunter Biden. At my approximately hour-long meeting with Joe that night, we discussed the Biden's history, the Biden's family business plans with the Chinese, with which he was plainly familiar, at least at a high level. On numerous occasions, it was made clear to me that Joe Biden's involvement was not to be mentioned in writing, but only face-to-face.
He's going to be there at the House Oversight tomorrow. Yeah. Is there new information, or, quite frankly, even if it's old, it's still dynamite, and we know Hunter really hates that guy. What's going to happen?
Yeah, I think we'll highlight this whole access to the brand, what another business partner, Jason Galanis, called the Biden lift. They had this sort of motto or this mantra that they followed, those in business, when it came to Joe Biden. They said, say it, forget it, write it, regret it. So it was they tried to keep it all out of writing. They referred to him as, the big guy versus Joe Biden. So I think that we'll highlight that. Plus, just the number of times where Hunter Biden's business partner, who we've had in under oath for depositions, said one thing, and then when we had Hunter Biden, he said something else. So I think we'll highlight those contradictions as well tomorrow in this hearing.
How concerned are you about the informant, the FBI informant, Smirnov, I believe, who's still in federal custody? Seems like they arrested him for embarrassing the Bidens. I can't get over that. How central is that right now?
It wasn't central to the main case. It just buttressed and kind of corroborated what we already knew. But of course, the Democrats have made a big deal of this. Maybe he is a liar. Who knows? But what I do know is David Weiss had this information, this 1023, for 3 years. Scott Brady, U.S. Attorney in Pittsburgh, gave it to the Weiss investigation team clear back in 2020. So why did it take 3 years before they decided, we're going to charge this guy? But why did it take until we're in the middle of an impeachment inquiry to do that? So I find that interesting. When you had that information for all that time and suddenly, Shazam, you arrest him, then you let him go, then you arrest him again. I mean, who knows? But by the way, this guy also was used to put away other people. Chris Wray told us he's the most important informant in history. You can't have access to this. We can't give you his names. It could jeopardize his safety. And then you say he's a liar and arrest him twice. So I think there's a lot of questions to be answered. Maybe he did lie. We don't know. But we do know there's a lot of fishy things and strange things around the whole situation.
Well, even if he did lie, I mean, these FBI guys, they talk to criminals and terrorists all the time, and these 1023 forms are just supposed to be like notes, basically, from what somebody told you. It seems totally crazy that they arrested that guy, and I understand his story is not central, but yeah, it's just really creepy that they arrested him. Final word,
particularly when they told us how that we had to threaten contempt of Chris Wray for us to even see the document. So I mean, it's almost like they can't have it both ways.
Jim Jordan, so glad you're there on the case. We will be watching tomorrow at 10 o'clock, the House Oversight Committee holding the influence peddling, examining Joe Biden's abuse of public office hearing tomorrow. Thank you, sir.
You bet, Greg. Take care.
We'll be right back.
Good evening. I'm Mike Carter. As we wait for the polls to close in Arizona, it has once again been a very good night for prospective GOP nominee Donald Trump. Newsmax can now project that Trump will win the state of Kansas tonight. The former president now 4 for 4 on primary states so far this evening. President Biden also the projected winner in Kansas tonight. The uncommitted vote, take a look, 9% of that vote. In Illinois, both Trump and Biden have won their respective primaries tonight. The same can be said for the state of Ohio, where Trump and Biden are your winners. And in Donald Trump's home state of Florida tonight, Newsmax projects Trump will win the Sunshine State. Ron DeSantis, meanwhile, the governor of that state, getting just 4% of the vote. Nikki Haley with 14%. Let's head out now to Arizona, where correspondent John Glasgow is standing by at Kari Lake's GOP presidential primary watch party. John?
Yeah, Mike, it is rocking down here in Arizona. I'm here with Kyle and Blake, and they are out with their Trump's gear. They're supporting the team. They also are very much supporting Kari Lake. But I want to talk to you, Kyle, real quick. What do you like about former President Trump, and what don't you like about what's happening with President Biden?
I love President Trump. He gave us a list of the things he was going to do, and he went through there, and he checked them off, and he just did them all, and more. I'm from a state with John McCain, and it was so disappointing seeing a politician over and over and over only be conservative during an election year.
Blake, you're actually from California,
Absolutely.
But you're in Arizona tonight,
Right.
and you're a Trump supporter. Tell me why.
Look, President Trump is going to do what needs to be done on the border. I've been here in Arizona for a few days. I went down to Lukeville. I saw people coming across myself. Border's still wide open. President Trump will get it under control.
And do you think it will be a Republican win come November?
100% I do, yes.
All right, Mike, we'll send it back to you. We got more updates here from Kari Lake's watch party a little bit later on. Back to you.
All right, thank you for that, John. Hoping to catch up with Kari Lake at the top of the hour. For more updates, stick with Newsmax. We'll have your primary watch all night.
Okay, it's amazing how little discussion our loss in Afghanistan gets. You know, the Taliban is running the show in Afghanistan, and no one really seems to care. It's kind of incredible. If you watch the discussion to the extent that it's happening, Joe Biden seems to be blaming the military, and the military blaming Joe Biden. And that brings us to General Mark Milley. He is now retired. He testified on Capitol Hill today in civilian clothes. I saw a lot of bureaucratic finger pointing, very subtle, not without skill. He's a player in the Beltway. But this was just flat out weird, in my opinion. Listen to this.
We lost over 200 U.S. and international troops and many more wounded in action in units that were under my direct command in several tours and multiple years of combat in both Iraq and Afghanistan. And every commander who's ever served in combat knows that we personally issued the orders that gave the task, the purpose, the place, and the time of that soldier's death or wounds.
It's almost like he's boasting. I can't figure that out. I can't figure him out. I'd like to bring in some experts. Will Thibault, U.S. Army veteran. He is the director of the American Military Project at the Claremont Institute. Welcome back, Will. And Brigadier General retired Blaine Holt of the Air Force. I don't know if you noticed that, but I just found it to be an odd thing to say in that setting or any other, General Holt.
I think he was reading a passage out of a book he's probably writing that, will put him at the center of nobility, of course. But what I found today about his testimony was absolutely reprehensible, because it must be cover your butt season in Washington, D.C. right now, because everybody's trying to get their narrative together for all the ills of this administration. And let's not forget that the largest disaster that we've had probably as a military, broke faith with all these soldiers who paid the ultimate price or life, limb, treasure, and their families. And yet now here he is to tell us all about how he didn't support any of it when he had the option to resign that commission at any time. And what we found was the generals that presided over that, the flags, nobody held to account. In fact, they were promoted. That national security team, Greg, is still intact tonight. It's the same national security team that has brought you Ukraine, has mismanaged the Middle East. We have World War III lurking around every corner, including here at home with a wide open border, on failed national security led by the academic-in-chief, Jake Sullivan. And so for the generals to come back today and to bravely say, I never supported this, I find that hollow, empty, and an affront to those who wore the uniform.
And the generals these days, I mean, they like to give the political masters what they want to hear. That's the current climate. Will, your thoughts on today, and if you don't mind commenting on my last observation there.
Well, Greg, I'm not sure to whom Mark Milley was trying to prove something with that comment you clipped. But honestly, I think they had the wrong hearing. Obviously, the withdrawal from Afghanistan was a catastrophe, and we lost American lives because of incompetence in the military and in the White House. But if you had asked any of those soldiers under Mark Milley's command at any time during the 20-year war in Afghanistan, they would have told you that this ship was a house of cards and that it was doomed to fall. But what did we hear back in D.C.? What did the Pentagon tell Congress over and over again? Is we just need more time. We can convert Afghanistan into a stable democracy. That was clearly a lie, because we spent 20 years building a country that collapsed over the course of a weekend. Where are our hearings over that foreign policy disaster that cost so many lives? We need to scrutinize this withdrawal and where it leaves us as a nation now, but we cannot forget the extent to which military decision-making was held unaccountable by the war that they lost when we were supposed to have been winning for so long.
How about that? Yeah, totally, Will. General, I mean, you know, it's not just Mark Milley. It's 20 years of generals manipulating political leaders to some degree, claiming success when there wasn't success. These Afghan security forces are doing great when they were horrible. What about that? I mean, it's more than Milley. It's military culture in general.
Yeah, we've had 60 years of low-intensity conflicts and warfare without one hint of victory or closure to victory. So we're awfully good at getting into wars, and we're awfully good at, tactically, the United States military, nobody's better at kicking down things and breaking things, and tactically we're the best. But when it gets to what does the war look like for closure, well, then we get awfully politically, awfully quick. And it's that swamp in D.C., the defense industrial base, that revolves around endless warfare. And we see it all ginned back up as they try to keep Ukraine on life support. What's the next tranche of weaponry that's going to go into here? And really, we have a national security problem. So if the neocons are bloodthirsty for their next war, well, look no further than Haiti, because those are cannibals. And now they're coming here to join Hamas, the Venezuela version of Hezbollah, and all the other groups, including the PLA, that are here living amongst us. Our national security problems are right here. We cannot keep going if we're not going to be sober about our failures, and most importantly, hold those to account who have had these levels of power and made the wrong decisions.
So, Will, what about, we all want to support the troops, right? But I feel like support the troops that mantra, that good feeling has almost been weaponized in a way by the military. You support the troops, you can't question the troops. You question us, you undermine us, you break down morale, all that kind of stuff. I think that's a game the military's been playing for a very long time, and it needs to be called out and it needs to stop.
Well, and at the root of that game is a conflation of military policy with foreign policy. We think that all decisions that affect the waters outside of the United States start and end at the Pentagon. So we think the only solution is a military one. And we've lost this professional distinction between the mandate that military leaders have to provide recommendations for military solutions to foreign policy decisions that folks in the State Department and the White House make. If we see our soldiers, sailors, airmen, and Marines as pawns of political decisions, we're going to lose trust in the military as an institution. And I think you're already seeing evidence of that. And the wars in Iraq and Afghanistan are a big symptom of what's happening when you conflate these two types of distinct policy choices. We need to let generals fight wars, not make the decisions about if and when we should go to war. Those decisions are with political leaders who should be held accountable. And there's no distinction between the civilian and military these days, and that's a real deep issue that we have to solve in the next year or so.
Blaine Holt and Will Tebow. Will Tebow and Blaine Holt. Thank you, gentlemen, very, very much.
Great to be with you both.
Yeah, you guys are smart. Very much so. Thank you. We'll be right back. The keys to understanding President Trump. I know you know some people, friends, maybe family members who still can't get over it. Oh my gosh, why did he say this? Number one, whatever he said, he's usually right. And number two, consider these three things, okay? He's not a politician, okay? There are three facts about him. Not a politician. Billionaire, yes. If you add it all up, the property's very much so a billionaire. And he's from Queens, New York. Not a career politician. The career politicians that Google loves, especially career Democrat politicians. Did you see this? Google, the tech giant, go to them, I don't know, probably 100 times a day to find information. Maybe not anymore. Maybe I should find some other search engine. Is there another search engine? I guess there's Yahoo. There's got to be a few others. They're skewing things for Democrats, especially Barack Obama. Can I go through the Media Research Center's findings? They just conducted this massive study, and Media Research Center, their researchers have found 41 times where Google interfered in elections over the last 16 years. In every case, Google harmed the candidates who threatened its left-wing candidate of choice. Yep. Data findings show that the number of votes shifted by Google's actions grew from 2.6 million in 2016 to at least 6 million in 2020, a 140% increase. And they were doing it all the way back in 2008, 2007, 2008. Who remembers when Hillary Clinton was running against Barack Obama for the Democrat nomination? Google was doing everything they could to help Barack Obama and hurt Hillary Clinton. If you search for Hillary, there wouldn't be so many results, more for Obama, everything driving people toward Obama. Fast forward to 2016, they did everything they could to help Hillary Clinton and hurt Donald Trump. Big tech. They think they run the world, and in some ways they do. I don't like it, not one bit. True Social, there got to be some more alternatives, right? Bing, do we have Bing anymore? I don't know. I'll be right back. Baby time. There's Annalise saying cheese whenever there's a camera present. And that's 2-year-old Madeline making her way into the pool.
Why do you eat cheese and you say cheese?
You're about to hear my wife's voice.
Madeline, turn around.
Turn around.
Madeline. Madeline, turn around.
There she turns around. Anyway, they're really becoming decent swimmers. They're still in floaties. That's okay. Terrified of going underwater, working on that. Good night, everybody. Thank you for supporting the show. I will be back tomorrow night. All the best.
Abraham Lincoln began the war between the states with a single stated purpose: to preserve the Union. So it surprised everyone when in July of 1862, President Lincoln announced his intentions to issue an Emancipation Proclamation to free the Southern slaves. Lincoln was urged to delay his proclamation until the Union Army could boast a battlefield victory. That opportunity came at the Battle of Antietam, when Union forces drove Lee's army out of Maryland. 5 days later, on September 22, 1862, President Lincoln issued the preliminary Emancipation Proclamation, stating slaves in those areas still in rebellion within 100 days will be freed.
Good evening. I'm Chris Plant. Welcome to the Right Squad. Tonight, Trump White House official Peter Navarro goes to jail while Hunter Biden and his crooked pals walk free for the same thing. The two-tiered system of justice allowing cruel and unusual punishment against Donald Trump and his allies. Plus, the deep state is awesome. That's the left's new narrative, their new talking point, the New York Times. As Trump vows to drain the swamp, the people of the New York Times trying to convince the people of the United States of America that the swamp in Washington is actually a great thing. It's really cool. And later, a cry factory. The left needed another safe space for their feelings, so now they've built one where they can shed their liberal tears together. So many of them. Somebody throw them a towel. And we've got all that and a lot more coming up this hour, but we begin with this. Joe Biden's lawless border, his open frontier border, is putting America in danger. I think we all know that. A nation without a border isn't really a nation at all, isn't it? It's a free-for-all. And that's what we're watching in real time in the United States of America, not just at the border, but all across the country. Joe Biden is ignoring his constitutional duty to protect our borders, our sovereignty, our people, our population, by refusing to deport anyone that comes here illegally and incentivizing more and more people coming in across our border illegally. The great state of Texas tried to make matters better by taking matters into their own hands and arrest those illegals that are infiltrating the state of Texas. They actually are a border state there. And for trying to enforce the law. You know, the Biden administration sued Texas for trying to enforce those laws. Today, the United States Supreme Court has actually upheld the rule of law, ruling that Texas can enforce its sweeping new immigration law, allowing state police officers to arrest illegal aliens. All three liberal justices on the court, of course, dissented. It's a 6-3 vote, saying that it will invite chaos. Apparently, they don't get cable TV where they are. But, you know, expect the Biden administration to appeal this and continue to wage war against Texas. Let the border bloodbath continue. That's right, I said bloodbath. This comes right after an Obama-appointed federal judge ruled that these very illegal aliens that Biden is, you know, fighting to allow into our country can, get this now, can carry firearms. Illegal aliens, the Obama judge ruled, illegal aliens can wander the land carrying firearms even if you can't. U.S. District Judge Sharon Johnson Coleman ruled that an illegal alien had his Second Amendment rights despite not being a U.S. citizen or being in the country legally at all. And he had his Second Amendment rights violated. That's crazy. An Obama judge. This is why we're in such deep stuff over here. When he was charged with the illegal possession of a firearm, he's an illegal alien, and the Obama judge says, oh, that's fine. He's got Second Amendment rights, while they're trying to take away your Second Amendment rights. The United States is being invaded by illegals and gang members from too many countries to list here. It's only a 1-hour show. And the left is of course, you know, arming them while simultaneously fighting to disarm you and me, law-abiding citizens, tax-paying citizens in the United States of America. We're here with tonight's squad. So why don't we jump right in? There's a couple of crazy things, right? We've got the Supreme Court ruling in favor of Texas, and it's a 6-3 vote. Surprise, surprise. That's great stuff. And then we've got an Obama judge saying, oh, an illegal alien busted with a firearm, that's fine. He's got Second Amendment rights just like, you know, normal, legal, tax-paying Americans.
I'm really surprised it took the Supreme Court this long to overrule the lower courts on the Texas case because, I mean, yes, it's federal law and the federal supremacy clause, but they are enforcing the federal law, and it should have never had to come to this. If the Biden administration would do their jobs, Texas wouldn't have to do it for them, So I'm not shocked, but yesterday, Justice Alito continued the stay on this decision, and today they overruled it. So eventually it happened. It's good. Unfortunately, I don't know, I have to understand why Texas, the Texas Rangers and all the various law enforcement agencies are the ones that are going to have to put their lives on the line to do what Joe Biden won't do.
As the federal government is not doing its job. And Roma, the Obama judge, ruled that an illegal alien in the country illegally carrying a firearm is covered by the Second Amendment, even if you're not.
Right. Well, you have to remember that many of the people that we're finding come across our border are terrorists. They are not families seeking economic asylum like the Biden administration is claiming. So you have to worry about situations like this. And to see, you know, an Obama administration, you know, official basically saying that they have a right to carry arms, they have a right to anything that U.S. citizens have a right to, is ridiculous but not shocking, because you at the same time have the narrative from the left saying that they have a right to vote in many states now. So there really is no limit to what they are trying to twist when it comes to this narrative on illegal immigration in the country. And it's really worrisome for the American people. One thing that I just want to point out quickly is the conversation that Elon Musk had that went viral recently, explaining to Don Lemon that, yes, illegal immigration does end up changing the vote for the presidential election for Democrats. Why? Because on day one of the Biden admin, he ruled that the census will include illegal immigrants. That changes it by 2022 votes in the House. That's huge.
Well, they're updating their old 3/5 of a person trick that the Democrats pulled so long ago. And, you know, and this time they're hoping, and they will, get more seats in the House of Representatives, just like they did when the Democrats were the Confederate States.
What's interesting about what Roma said is that the actually when Hispanics kind of become legal immigrants or legal citizens and they can vote, they're actually, a majority of them are now, or a plurality are now voting for Trump. And so if Republicans were smart politically for decades to come, they would want more people coming from Mexico and Central America. And so I think maybe they're making a short-term calculus about trying to beat Biden with immigration, and not the long-term of Hispanics are more culturally conservative, more economically conservative, and they're prime Republican voters.
Well, that's true. Catholic and family-oriented work ethic, everything that the Democrats are not. But the Democrats, I think, will get the Venezuelan gang members and the jihad vote that crosses our border. You know, the justice system continues to falter in the United States of America. You may have noticed that. The Washington State Supreme Court has now ruled that prospective attorneys, you go to law school, you know, you take the bar exam. Well, and not in Washington anymore. You don't have to take the bar exam to become a lawyer in the state of Washington because, you know, formalities. The court claims that the test, the bar exam, they say disproportionately and unnecessarily blocks marginalized groups, isn't that always the case, from entering the practice of law, and that the exam has racism and classism written into the test itself. So here we go. The bar exam in the state of Washington is racist, and it's classist, too. So it's like the whole Marxist bundle.
Yeah, I mean, that is wild. I think that you should probably not want to commit any crime in Washington, although they have Chaz and Chop there where you can literally commit any crime you want and go unpunished. But is your lawyer going to be competent? I mean, I have no idea. But I do want to say really quickly on the immigration thing, my friend John Ashbrook has this great point about Greg Abbott, and he says it takes a man in a wheelchair to have the spine that the Biden administration lacks to actually do what's necessary to secure our border. Greg Abbott, were it not for him, the border would be far worse. And I think Joe Biden should be sending him a thank you note saying, look, you know, the left won't let me do this job here. Thank you for actually doing it for me. I'm sorry I've been making your life so difficult, so these people will vote for me in November.
Somebody's got to do it, you know, often appalled but rarely shocked. And that is that. The justice system is allowing the cruel and unusual punishment of President Trump and his allies, of course. Today, former Trump trade advisor Peter Navarro reported to prison in Miami for a 4-month sentence, one day after Chief Justice John Roberts denied his motion to stave off the jail term as he is going through the appeals process. Navarro is in prison for a contempt of Congress conviction after refusing to comply with a subpoena from the sham January 6th committee that the Democrats were running, that Soviet-style kangaroo court. Here's what he said before surrendering today in Miami.
When I walk in that prison today, the justice system, such as it is, will have done a crippling blow to the constitutional separation of powers and executive privilege. This is the partisan weaponization of our judicial system. I will be the only person in that prison who's been convicted of a misdemeanor a misdemeanor. Everybody else is in there for felonies. They are coming after Donald Trump with the same tactics, tools, and strategies they used to put me over there today. I'm pissed. That's what I'm feeling right now, but I'm also afraid of only one thing. I'm afraid for this country, because what they're doing should have a chilling effect on every American, regardless of their party. If they come for me, they can come for you.
Yet, of course, no punishment for Hunter Biden, who repeatedly defied his congressional subpoena, and he's defying it even today, refusing to testify in a public congressional hearing, which he insisted and demanded that he be allowed to have a public hearing. Once he's given that, he says he's not showing up. He's requested, that is to say, he's been subpoenaed to show up on Capitol Hill tomorrow. But he's saying he's not going to show up. But I don't see any prison sentence in the future for him. And his friend, Devin Archer, also, Matthew, also in defiance of a congressional subpoena, but no arrests at Reagan Airport, no leg restraints as they did with Peter Navarro. And I think, honestly, if they could put him in a prison north of the Arctic Circle, they probably would.
Well, I think we should be clear. Hunter Biden is not without punishment. He had to do a press conference with Eric Swalwell, and organizing that sounds like that may be almost as bad as 4 months in prison. And look, I think it goes way beyond what we're talking about just now. I was just covering this hearing about the failures in Afghanistan this morning, where Steve Nakui, who's the Gold Star father, who was arrested for shouting during Joe Biden's State of the Union, was there, and his charges have not been dropped. Even though normally this would always happen. There was a father who protested during Trump's State of the Union who was escorted out, but the Capitol Police are still adamant on prosecuting Steve Nakui. So today, this morning, I wrote about how Darrell Ice wrote to the Capitol Police and said, hello, what the heck's going on here, guys? Don't you have actual crime to be prosecuting? So it goes way beyond just Peter Navarro, and the priorities of prosecuting Gold Star fathers like Steve Nakui for, in essence, nothing, it's totally out of whack.
I want to play devil's advocate here and look for a silver lining for Peter. I agree with the two systems of justice. I'm not disrespecting that.
He is going to get jacked in prison.
Well, he's also going to have 4 months to write a book and get his first television news interview right afterwards. Peter can market. I know Peter. He's a good marketer and self-promoter. He's going to be able to cash in off of this when he gets out.
He'll also probably get like a big promotion if there's a second Trump administration, since he's literally doing time for his loyalty to Donald Trump and not actually, he didn't comply with what Congress was telling them, Trump administration officials to do. Most officials, you can actually, if you communicate with Congress, instead of just willfully not even giving one word, then he could have pleaded the fifth. He could have said, I can't discuss that, but he just totally flouted this.
Did you guys see he's going to have a Substack in prison?
Only one thing, that he will get a promotion in the second term, but that's not because of this. That's because he was one of the hardest working people in the Trump White House. My office in the Trump White House was right next door to his, and Peter Navarro worked day in and day out for the American people. All through COVID, he was on the phone 24/7 getting PPE, getting supplies to the nurses and the hospital staff that were suffering here, that were complaining about wearing the same mask for weeks on end. You want to know who got them new masks? Peter Navarro. And this is how he's being thanked by the public, by the Biden administration, and by the two-tier system of justice.
Honestly, you think we should closer to moving the Russian model or the Chinese model? Honestly, you think Devin Archer, the Biden family business associate, who's also defying his congressional subpoena, you think he's going to go to jail? Do you think Hunter Biden's going to go to jail for defying the congressional subpoena?
Well, I don't think that those people will go to jail for that specifically. Hunter Biden still has legal issues that he is facing, and so he very well may go to jail one day. Maybe they could be friends, and Peter and Hunter Biden could play Scrabble in prison. We'll have to see.
I wouldn't bet against Peter Navarro playing Scrabble with Hunter Biden.
I don't think that. And Devin Archer was convicted almost 2 years ago. Another. Hunter Biden business associate and Biden family business associate. He was convicted of swindling a Native American tribe out of $60 million and was sentenced to 1 year and 1 day in prison. And he hasn't done a day. And his appeals are going forward. And we really do have a third world style, two-tiered system of justice in the United States of America. None of us has ever seen anything like it, and if we only had a legitimate news media, this would be a big story.
And isn't Daniel making the point that shouldn't Hunter Biden go to jail for the same thing as Peter Navarro? I mean, Peter
It's not
Navarro.
the exact same thing.
Last I checked, though, Peter Navarro didn't throw a gun in a trash can outside of a school. He didn't defraud all these people. That was Hunter Biden. Obviously, he may go to jail for some of these things. But I guess, look, feel free to. How is it not the exact same thing? I mean, he defied a congressional subpoena last I checked.
Well, there's different. This was a congressional subpoena about an insurrection in Congress.
Issued illegally by a committee that was supposed to have 13, only had 9, had no Republicans on it.
Well, they offered Republicans, and they were going to do it. And
we can argue this all day.
But
the
why,
legality of that committee is a sham.
Is Hunter Biden ignoring that subpoena not the same?
I don't speak for Hunter Biden, so I think people should respect congressional subpoenas. Yeah. And so, but if you saw John Roberts, who was put on the court by a Republican president, George W. Bush, he said, Navarro, go to jail.
Yeah, we can talk about the details of both of these issues, but the matter of the fact is when the American people look at Hunter Biden and Peter Navarro, they see that the justice system is not fair. They see that the Trump family is being absolutely persecuted by the Biden administration, and that the Biden family is getting off scot-free, minus the one little factor that he's finally been called out for his lack of mental acuity and his elderly age that is clearly a problem for a sitting president. It's just not fair, and I do believe that the American people see right through it, and they'll vote that way in November.
These are abuses of power all over the place. We've been seeing it since the Obama-Biden administration, when they used the IRS against political enemies in 2012, then the FBI, the Justice Department, the intelligence community. I live in Washington, D.C. I live in a very, very corrupt city, and I say that with no glee. It's a tragic era that we're in, and I hope it doesn't last much longer. Coming up later, want to be a better spy? Dress in drag. Come on. Undercover takes on a whole new meaning in Joe Biden's office of the Director of National Intelligence. But first, one of the countless lies the left continues to spread is that abortion is inaccessible in the United States of America, but new numbers expose the absurd hypocrisy of that false claim. That's coming up next.
Good evening, I'm Mike Carter. Despite already being his party's prospective nominee, Donald Trump once again dominating yet another primary night. Trump 4 for 4 tonight with primary wins in Kansas, Illinois, Florida, and Ohio. Let's head out to Arizona now as we wait for the polls to close there with correspondent John Glasgow, who's standing by with Republican U.S. Senate candidate in Arizona, Kari Lake. John.
Yeah, thanks, Mike. And here we got the celebration going on here behind us. As we mentioned, Trump has taken 4 states already, looking to take 5. Arizona is the next one. Results are coming in. Kari, you proudly supported for Donald Trump today. I saw that. You put it out on your social. Why? What is it that you love so much about President Trump?
He did a great job helping to make our country great, and boy, do we need to have him make it great again. And you can hear the people here love President Trump. Arizona is Trump country, and Arizona voted for Trump, and they're going to vote for him again on November 5th. We need President Trump. We are at ground zero for a border crisis that is killing our country. 12 million people pouring across, invading our country. Taxpayer dollars going to house them, give them health care, give them food and clothing. Meanwhile, Americans are struggling. So we're going to work really hard to get President Trump the victory. We're going to vote Kari Lake for Senate against a Biden-like opponent of mine and start to turn things around in Arizona.
And real quickly, you're running, as you mentioned, for Senate. What do you want to change most in Arizona?
Well, you heard it right there. Build the wall. We want to build the wall. We want to send these people who poured in during the Biden invasion back to their homeland so that we can save our country, and we want to start rebuilding America. America is in need of some TLC, and I want to go to the Senate and help make sure that we're getting President Trump's great America First agenda passed.
All right. Well, best of luck to you when that rolls around, and thank you so much for having us here. We appreciate it. We'll send back to you, Mike, in the studio.
All right, thanks for that, John. We'll, of course, have a full wrap-up of all of today's primary states' wins for Donald Trump. We'll see what happens there in Arizona tonight, as well as that special election being held in California as well. You can check on that on Wake Up America tomorrow morning. And there you have it. Bernie Moreno winning the the primary election in Ohio tonight. Bernie Moreno, of course, will now take on the Democratic incumbent in a race that could very well determine the future of the Senate next year.